Chapter 547. Eastern Region of the Divine Realm. Several thousand meters around Mount Biwichu under the jurisdiction of Yuchi City was completely covered by a formation array. At the time when Qin Yu subdued those 82 heavenly deities in the Great Formation Array, many more heavenly deities rushed over. These heavenly deities were even slower than Qiuzhong Fu and the others. Thus, they naturally fell behind. There were several tens of heavenly deities that arrived in succession. However, when they saw the enormous formation array, they all opened their eyes wide. Looking at this universe formation array from the outside, it was indeed extremely frightening. That was because this great formation array absorbed the divine spiritual energy of the world. This caused the divine spiritual energy within 100 miles of the Great Formation Array to gather toward the Great Formation Array. There were also all kinds of different colored energies flowing on the surface of the Great Formation Array. What is that? Where are the heavenly deities that came before us? A mid-level heavenly deity said in shock. At the same time, this mid-level heavenly deity grabbed a low-level heavenly deity. You came before me. Speak, exactly what happened. Say, Lord. That low-level heavenly deity said with a stutter. When I arrived, I saw several tens of heavenly deities in the sky. However, for some unknown reason, a black-clothed youth merely waved out a couple rays of light and those heavenly deities were completely trapped. Right after this low-level heavenly deity finished speaking, someone immediately shouted. Impossible, Mr. Qiuzhong and the others have already arrived. Could it be that Mr. Qiuzhong is also trapped? However, someone immediately refuted. When I arrived, I also saw the scene of Mr. Qiuzhong and the others being trapped by the Great Formation Array. This is most definitely the truth. When Qin Yu was fighting against the 82 heavenly deities, his attention was completely focused on Qiuzhong Fu and the others. Thus, he did not notice that several heavenly deities had already arrived. A Great Formation Array capable of trapping high-level heavenly deities? How is this possible? Those heavenly deities that arrived later were all shocked. However, in a blink of an eye, there were heavenly deities that began to flee. As they fled, they even urged, "Everyone, it's best that we leave quickly. Even Mr. Qiuzhong has been trapped. If we go, we would only be courting death." These several tens of heavenly deities rapidly fled. Following their escape, the news of Qin Yu setting up a great formation array that trapped several tens of heavenly deities, including Qiuzhong Fu, quickly spread. The city master of Yuchi City, Yuchi Gonglan, immediately received the news. He immediately used the special teleportation formations of all the cities in the Divine Realm and directly rushed to the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold to inform the utmost East Sage Emperor. After the utmost East Sage Emperor obtained the news, he immediately dispatched Huang Jing and Yuchi Gonglan, who were familiar with Qin Yu, to proceed to Yuchi City's Mount Biwichu to invite Qin Yu. At the moment when Huang Jing and the others were rapidly flying toward Mount Biwichu from Yuchi City, the other Sage Emperors, Azura Sea, Mount Blood Demon, and Dual Domain Island all received the news. After all, every force had their own forces in every major city of the Divine Realm. Their informants received the news about the same time as Yuchi Gonglan, but it was a little troublesome for them to send the news back. Unlike Yuchi City, where one could directly reach Mount Dazzling Gold, North Pole Floating Snow City, in the back garden of the North Pole Sage Emperor Palace, Zhang Fan was currently chatting and laughing with his wife. As for the head of the intelligence department, the mid-level heavenly deity Zhang Yushan, he had hurriedly arrived at the entrance of the rear garden. The guards at the entrance immediately extended their hands to stop Zhang Yushan. "Let him in." Before Zhang Yushan could say anything, Zhang Fan directly said. After Zhang Yushan walked in, he immediately knelt down on one knee and reported respectfully, "Your Majesty Sage Emperor, we have just received news that a formation array expert was discovered in Yuchi City in the eastern region of the Divine Realm. This formation array expert had set up a great formation array and completely trapped several tens of heavenly deities including Qiuzhong Fu." Zhang Fan, who originally did not care about the formation array expert, was now looking at Zhang Yushan in amazement. "Yushan, Are you certain of the accuracy of your information? It's definitely Chozhong Fu that was trapped in the Great Formation Array? Although the number of high-level heavenly deities in the divine realm was quite large, the utmost North Sage Emperor Zhang Fan still remembered the name and information of every single high-level heavenly deity. I am absolutely certain that someone had personally witnessed it, Zhang Yushan said with absolute certainty. Zhang Fan slightly nodded. He then closed his eyes. In practically a blink of an eye, the entire divine realm was within Zhang Fan's observation. That great formation array of Yuchi City was also within his observation. In an instant, Zhang Fan opened his eyes. His eyes were bursting forth with astonishment. Yushan, personally bring my invitation card to find that person who set up the formation array. A rare smile appeared on Zhang Fan's face. Husband, is this person worthy enough for husband to personally send a Sage Emperor's invitation card? Zhang Fan's wife Zhou Wanfeng asked curiously. Zhang Fan immediately smiled and explained. My wife, I have observed that person's formation array. That formation array could actually be said to be a space. From the way I see it, his attainment in formation arrays is about the same as the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan from back then. He's that exceptional? Zhou Wanfeng said in amazement. That Che Ho Yuan was the craftsman god. How could this person possibly be comparable to the craftsman god? For Grandmaster Artifact Craftsmen, the most difficult hurdle would be their attainment in formation arrays. If he possessed the strength of the craftsman god's formation arrays, then wouldn't it mean that he might be a new craftsman god? At this moment, Zhou Wanfeng also understood why her husband thought so highly of this newly emerged formation array expert. Zhang Fan shook his head and smiled. He did not say much. From Zhang Fan's point of view, it was hard to say whether or not the craftsman god's formation array strength would be able to match up to this newly emerged formation array expert. Zhang Fan looked to Zhang Yushan. Yushan, what is that person's name? He wanted to send the Sage Emperor's invitation card. As he did not know the name of the other party, it was unsuitable for him to do so. Qin Yu. Zhang Yushan promptly replied. Oh, Qin Yu, that's a pretty good name. Zhang Fan lightly smiled. With a flip of his hand, a golden scroll appeared in his hand. After that, he used his divine awareness to write an invitation card. Zhang Yushan received the Sage Emperor's invitation card and was about to leave. Wait a moment. Zhang Fan suddenly spoke. Zhang Yushan immediately stopped. He turned around and waited for Zhang Fan's order. Zhang Fan smiled and said, I reckon that the utmost East Sage Emperor ought to be a step faster than us. It would take him some time to reach that mountain from Yuchi City. You ought to directly go from the floating snow city to the conveying array of Mount Dazzling Gold and wait for Qin Yu there. Yes, Your Majesty Sage Emperor. Zhang Yushan displayed a smile on his face. Indeed, if he were to rush to Yuchi City, he would likely not be able to encounter Qin Yu. However, if he were to go to the conveying array of Mount Dazzling Gold, he would definitely be able to meet Qin Yu. A formation array grandmaster that was able to set up a formation array space, with merely his strength, he was definitely comparable to a high-level heavenly deity. More importantly, a formation array grandmaster only needed to put forth some effort to easily become a grandmaster artifact craftsman. The allure of a grandmaster artifact craftsman, which power could possibly resist it? Actually, if that power were to send out a god king, he would be able to arrive before Qin Yu in merely a blink of an eye. Merely, the status of a god king was too high. He was not much inferior to the 8 great sage emperors. To have a god king personally go and invite a formation array grandmaster? No god king would be willing to lower himself to do such a thing. Several days later, Mount Bewitchu. Inside the formation array universe, a group of people were standing there respectfully. At the very front was only Chozhong Fu. Behind him were 10 people: Qi Hongfeng, Shen Yuyang, Lan Shanhua, Liu Yao, Liu Rao, Yigong Shu, Jin Kong, Jin Long, Lu Bing and Tan Jiu. Behind these 10 people were 122 low-level heavenly deities. We pay our respects to Master. The 113 heavenly deities all bowed respectfully. Qin Yu stood before these 113 heavenly deities. He faced this group of heavenly deities. Behind Qin Yu were Kuro, Uncle Fu, Wu Lan, Wu He, Hong Yu and Lu Shui. Qin Yu turned his gaze to Tan Jiu. Tan Jiu! Qin Yu shouted. He had a light smile on his face. Tan Jiu took a step forward and said respectfully, "Master, Tan Jiu was disrespectful to Master in the past. I hope that Master can forgive me." At this moment, Tan Jiu did not dare to have the slightest thought of disobeying. "The feeling of resentment toward me is unpleasant, isn't it?" Qin Yu said with a light smile. Tan Jiu's complexion turned pale. When he was first sucked into the God-Sealing Pagoda, Tan Jiu did indeed feel resentment toward Qin Yu. However, right after he felt resentment toward Qin Yu, he felt as if his soul was being burned. It was only at this moment that Tan Jiu recalled that his soul was bound. He could not even have the slightest thought of disobeying. Else, he would only be bringing suffering upon himself. Tan Jiu will never dare to do that again. Tan Jiu said respectfully. Qin Yu nodded. He took a glance at Qiuzhong Fu and said, "Qiuzhong Fu, I have heard that ordinary heavenly deities address you as Mr. Qiuzhong. Are you feeling very sullen right now?" Qiuzhong Fu said in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. For Master to be able to set up such an exceptional grand formation, Master's attainments in spirit formations are the strongest among all the people that Qiuzhong has met in all these years. For Master to possess such attainments in spirit formations, I presume Master's attainments in artifact refinement must also be very high. Qiuzhong believes that following Master will not be inferior to being a bandit. Actually, Qiuzhong Fu felt very helpless. Even his soul was bound. What could he possibly do? "Qiuzhong Fu, from today on, you shall manage these heavenly deities together with Uncle Fu. At the same time, you shall become my personal attendant. When I am out, you shall follow me. When I am training, you can go and do your own things." Qin Yu said indifferently, "Yes, Master." Qiuzhong Fu had a happy expression on his face. What Qiuzhong Fu feared the most was that Qin Yu would leave him in the Jianglan's realm the entire time. That would be too boring. If he were to follow Qin Yu, he would instead be able to travel all over the divine realm. With an intention from Qin Yu, the 112 heavenly deities were all brought into the Jianglan's realm. Only Qiuzhong Fu, Hong Yu, Lu Shui and Wu He remained. "Big brother, I had thought that the flowing light spear path that I created would be able to defeat Big Brother. Never would I have expected that, in a blink of an eye, Big Brother would actually be able to capture a high-level heavenly deity and even set up such a grand formation." Kuro gasped in admiration. Qin Yu said in surprise, "Flowing light spear path, is that strange spear technique of yours?" "What do you mean by strange?" Kuro said in dissatisfaction. He had managed to comprehend this sort of cultivation path with great difficulty. Qin Yu started to laugh. "Oh, it's not strange, it's amazing, okay?" Kuro also started to laugh. "Lord Qin Yu, it's truly strange. Right after we returned to the divine realm, we were able to sense when the heavenly tribulation would descend." Hong Yu charmingly glanced at Qiuzhong Fu, who had a cold expression the entire time, and then said to Qin Yu. Wu Lan also nodded and said, "That's right, right after we returned, we were able to sense when the heavenly tribulation would descend." Oh! Qin Yu suddenly understood. Sure enough, as he had anticipated, the universal world was a world that existed by itself. The divine tribulation that was commonly used in the divine realm, immortal, devil and demon realm was unable to descend upon the universal world. "Approximately when will you undergo the heavenly tribulation?" Qin Yu said with a smile. "Very soon, about 100 years. Hong Yu said. Wu He's loud voice sounded. "I'm about the same, about 200 years or so." Qin Yu slightly nodded. At this moment, beside Qin Yu, Qiuzhong Fu, who had a cold expression the entire time, was puzzled. As his master's subordinate, why would he only undergo the divine tribulation? "Well then, you all can enter the Jianglan's realm." "Xiao Hei, Are you going to train or are you going out with me? Qin Yu said with a smile. Of course I'm going out with Big Brother. Kuro said with a light smile. Immediately after, Kuro looked at the formation array space and gasped in admiration. This formation array space is truly amazing. It's about the same as the Zhonglan's realm. Hong Yu and them have yet to undergo the heavenly tribulation, yet they're actually able to maintain their human form here. Qin Yu slightly nodded. The formation array space was actually about the same as the Zhonglan's realm. They were both spaces. Merely, the Zhonglan's realm was completely fixed through artifact crafting techniques. Qin Yu took out the Zhonglan's realm from the universal world and then absorbed it into his body. As long as he did not place the Zhonglan's realm in the universal world, the divine tribulation would still be able to sense Hong Yu and them. After easily absorbing the formation array space, Qin Yu and Kuro walked side by side in the front. Uncle Fu and Qiuzhong Fu followed behind them. Qin Yu. Huang Jing, who had been waiting outside the formation array for a long time, immediately shouted upon seeing that the formation array had disappeared. At the same time, her body flashed and she arrived before Qin Yu. At this moment, beside Huang Jing was a middle-aged man with thick black eyebrows. Merely by looking at his aura, one could sense that he was as heavy as Mount Tai. That middle-aged man opened his mouth and said, Qin Yu, I am the Yuqi city's city master, Yuqi Gonglon. This is the princess of the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold, Huang Fu Jing. The two of us have come under the order of the utmost East Sage Emperor to invite you to Mount Dazzling Gold and become a member of Mount Dazzling Gold. Huang Fu Jing, Princess. Qin Yu looked to Huang Jing with a smile on his face. Huang Jing could only smile. However, her fair little face had turned red. At this moment, Yuqi Gonglon handed a golden scroll to Qin Yu. Qin Yu and Kuro glanced at each other. Qin Yu then received the golden scroll. He immediately swept his divine awareness over the contents of the scroll. It was the utmost East Sage Emperor's invitation letter. Chapter 548. Yuqi Gonglon and Huang Fu Jing both looked to Qin Yu. They were waiting for Qin Yu's reply. If it was an ordinary person that received the Sage Emperor's invitation, they would definitely accept it excitedly. However, the current Qin Yu was a formation grandmaster. After muttering to himself for a moment, Qin Yu raised his head and looked to Huang Fu Jing. Miss Huang Jing, oh, Princess Huang Fu Jing, I wish to ask, once I enter the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold, do I have to obey the orders of the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold? Yuqi Gonglon raised his thumb to Huang Fu Jing. Brilliant. Huang Fu Jing smiled and said, I knew that you would be concerned about this. Before I left, I had already discussed this matter with my imperial father. As long as you come to our Mount Dazzling Gold, your freedom will not be restricted at all. Even if you want to leave in the future, our Mount Dazzling Gold will not obstruct you. Qin Yu relaxed. At the same time, he also felt grateful. This utmost East Sage Emperor was truly good to him. However, what Qin Yu didn't know was that it was not only the utmost East Sage Emperor. In fact, the other 7 Sage Emperors, including the people from Mount Blood Demon, Azura Sea and Dual Domain Island, did not restrict his freedom. If one's freedom was restricted, how could one possibly allow a formation grandmaster to join one's power? Big Brother, are you really planning to go? Kuro asked in a low voice. Monkey, he's at. Ho Fei was at the Azura Sea. As for the Azura Sea, it could be said that they were enemies of the 8 great Sage Emperors. It's fine. Didn't you hear that His Majesty the utmost East Sage Emperor has already agreed to allow us to leave as we wish in the future? Qin Yu said with a smile. Actually, with Qin Yu's abilities, what sort of place could possibly trap him? Merely, with the utmost East Sage Emperor's personal agreement, things would be much easier in the future. Yuqi Gonglon started to laugh. Very well, let's go then. Qin Yu nodded. Qiuzhong Fu? Yuqi Gonglon saw Qiuzhong Fu and said in surprise. I heard that you've been trapped by a great formation. What's wrong? Yuchi Gonglan did not believe that a high-level heavenly deity would submit so easily. Qin Yu promptly said, "Chouzhong is currently my personal attendant." When Chouzhong Fu heard what Qin Yu said, he felt a burst of gratitude in his heart. After all, if others knew that he was Qin Yu's slave, it would be very embarrassing. Huang Fu Jing was shocked. She said, "Chouzhong Fu is very arrogant. When I invited him to join Gold Dazzling Gold, he refused. I can't believe he is willing to be your servant, Qin Yu. It's not only a high-level heavenly deity as a personal attendant. That should be a puppet, right? Furthermore, it's no ordinary puppet." Yuchi Gonglan turned his gaze to Uncle Fu. Qin Yu's face darkened as he said, "Uncle Fu is my butler." In his heart, Qin Yu had already considered Uncle Fu to be a real person, a diligent old housekeeper. He didn't like people calling Uncle Fu a puppet. As soon as Yuchi Gonglan saw Qin Yu's expression, he knew what Qin Yu was thinking. He hastily said, "Hee, so it's brother Qin Yu's steward." With a laugh, Yuchi Gonglan no longer mentioned the matter of Uncle Fu. Qin Yu was merely chatting with Huang Fu Jing and Kuro. As for Yuchi Gonglan, he was chatting with Chouzhong Fu. Evidently, this Yuchi Gonglan and Chouzhong Fu were old acquaintances. The group of people were rapidly flying. Qin Yu had even unleashed his spatial domain, to include Uncle Fu within it. He had Uncle Fu follow behind him the entire time. Qin Yu's soul had reached the peak of low-level heavenly deity. With the assistance of Lu Xing's tear, he was indeed able to use the divine realm's spatial energy to unleash his spatial domain. After entering Yuchi City, Qin Yu, Huang Fu Jing and the others soon arrived at the location of the teleportation formation. Upon seeing the teleportation formation, Qin Yu was shocked. He knew that it was impossible to teleport in the divine realm. However, he never expected that there would be a teleportation formation in the divine realm. The teleportation formation before them was hexagonal in shape. It was capable of accommodating several tens of people at a time. Merely, this teleportation formation appeared to be very simple. Such a simple formation, is it really capable of teleporting people? Qin Yu said in shock. Yuchi Gonglan started to laugh. "Brother Qin Yu, this is what you don't know. This formation is simply useless. As for the main point, I am also not very sure about it. However, the Divine Realm's teleportation formation can only be set up by God King level experts. My Imperial Father had also said that this teleportation formation does not have much of a relationship with formation arrays. Instead, it is related to the spatial laws." Huang Fu Jing explained. Qin Yu had some vague ideas in his heart. Perhaps he would only be able to understand how to set up a teleportation formation after he completely comprehended the spatial laws of the Divine Realm. Once we teleport through, we will arrive below Mount Dazzling Gold. Yuchi Gonglan explained. Kuro asked in confusion. "Why don't we directly teleport into Mount Dazzling Gold?" Huang Fu Jing said with a beaming smile. "If we were to directly teleport into Mount Dazzling Gold, wouldn't that mean that as long as we spend some divine spiritual stones, even deities would be able to directly teleport into Mount Dazzling Gold?" "How would that work?" Kuro nodded. Qin Yu and them activated the teleportation formation. They did not feel the slightest bit of fluctuation. They only discovered that the space before them had changed. Qin Yu and them had arrived at their destination. "Haha, brother Yuchi. Which one of you is Qin Yu?" Right after Qin Yu and them arrived at the teleportation formation, they heard a burst of clamor. Furthermore, it seemed that those people were talking to them. Qin Yu looked over in confusion. There were over a dozen men and women standing outside of the teleportation formation. They were looking at Qin Yu and them with smiles on their faces. Qin Yu immediately determined that the group of people before him were all heavenly deity-level experts. The weakest among them were mid-level heavenly deities. What's going on here? Qin Yu turned around to look to Huang Fu Jing and Yuchi Gonglan in shock. With a smile on her face, Huang Fu Jing explained to Qin Yu. "Qin Yu, it's very simple. You, a formation grandmaster, are very popular. Thus, people from all over have come over. Let me introduce them to you. Those people who originally didn't recognize Qin Yu, upon hearing the conversation between Huang Fujing and Qin Yu, immediately knew that the black-clothed youth before them was Qin Yu. These are the people from the utmost South Sage Emperor's side, the Light Lens City. Huang Fujing pointed to a beautiful white-clothed beauty and said. That white-clothed beauty immediately bowed slightly. She said to Qin Yu, Mr. Qin Yu, I am representing my utmost South Sage Emperor to invite you to join our Light Lens City. This is the invitation card. As she said that, she was about to hand over the invitation card. However, Huang Fujing ignored her. She continued. These are the people from the utmost West Sage Emperor's side, the Mount Blazing Flame. Huang Fujing pointed to a scarlet-haired youth beside her. That scarlet-haired youth also bowed slightly. He smiled at Qin Yu and said, Qin Yu. Before he could finish his words, Huang Fujing continued to point to the next person. These are the people from the Northwest Sage Emperor's side, the Thunder Punishment City's people. It was a cold and grim woman. This woman's eyes would occasionally flicker with lightning. It was extremely strange. This cold and grim woman smiled to Qin Yu. Mr. Qin Yu, my family's His Majesty Sage Emperor thinks very highly of Mr. Qin Yu. He especially allowed me to... Huang Fujing interrupted this woman's words and continued to point to the next person. In a single breath, she mentioned 6 people. These 6 people were from 6 different Sage Emperors. Qin Yu felt strange. Why hadn't Huang Fujing introduced the people from the utmost North Sage Emperor? Could it be that the utmost North Sage Emperor hadn't sent anyone? This person is from the utmost North Sage Emperor's side, the Floating Snow City's people. Huang Fujing pointed to a youth and said. That youth bowed slightly and said, Mr. Qin Yu, I am Zhang Yushan. Under the orders of His Majesty the Sage Emperor, I invite Mr. Qin Yu to join our Floating Snow City. This is the invitation card. It was very rare for Qin Yu to extend his hand and accept the invitation card. Zhang Yushan's face immediately lit up with joy. After all, there were 6 people in a row. Yet, Qin Yu did not accept any invitation card. However, after Qin Yu accepted the invitation card, he sighed and said, Brother Yushan, I have a very good impression of the Floating Snow City. Unfortunately, I have already agreed to join Mount Dazzling Gold. Thus, I can only apologize. Zhang Yushan was startled. In the end, he could only shake his head helplessly. Qin Yu's face was filled with regret. In fact, Qin Yu had already thought about it. If he wanted to marry Li Er, it would not be wise to run over now. It would not be too late to leave after he had made sufficient preparations and talked to Uncle Lon. These 3 people should be from Dual Domain Island, Mount Blood Demon, and Azura Sea. However, I am not too familiar with them, so I will not introduce them. Huang Fujing said indifferently. From Huang Fujing's tone, it was clear that she did not have a good attitude towards these 3 people. The 3 people did not mind and began to introduce themselves. Qin Yu only listened. He glanced at the Azura Sea emissary and did not say anything. After everyone finished, Qin Yu said, Everyone, I have already agreed to the utmost East Sage Emperor's invitation. There is a sequence of events. I am very sorry. Qin Yu bowed to everyone and then left with Huang Fujing and the others. The utmost East Sage Emperor actually sent Princess Jing personally. No wonder he was able to recruit Qin Yu so easily. The emissaries sighed. In the end, the large group of people had no choice but to leave. Qin Yu raised his head and saw that the entire sky had been blocked. As long as one was below Mount Dazzling Gold, everything was dark. This Mount Dazzling Gold is so big. It has a circumference of at least 10,000 miles. Qin Yu sighed. Huang Fujing smiled and said, Mount Dazzling Gold has a circumference of nearly 50,000 miles. Among the 8 great holy lands, only the Western Flaming Mountain and the Northeastern Forest Ocean City are larger than it. 50,000 miles? Qin Yu raised his head and looked at the enormous floating mountain that covered the sky. He was even more shocked. Afterwards, Qin Yu, Kuro, Qiuzheng Fu, Uncle Fu, Huang Fu Jing and Yuqi Gonglan all flew upwards. Uncle Fu remained within the range of Qin Yu's spatial domain. The higher they flew, the closer they got to Mount Dazzling Gold. Qin Yu could sense how enormous Mount Dazzling Gold was. When they were completely close to the bottom of Mount Dazzling Gold, they discovered that the bottom of Mount Dazzling Gold was not a solid piece of metal. Instead, there were many ravines. Under Huang Fu Jing's lead, Qin Yu and the others entered a tunnel. The tunnel was very short. It was only 100 meters long. After passing through the tunnel, they stepped onto a mountain path. This twisting mountain path was over 1,000 miles long. Qin Yu and the others flew for quite a while before they saw the only city on Mount Dazzling Gold. The cave mansions outside the city are mostly where heavenly deities train. There are many scattered cave mansions on Mount Dazzling Gold. Huang Fu Jing pointed at the cave mansions outside the city that were built halfway up the mountain or on the cliffs. The city on Mount Dazzling Gold was much smaller than Mount Dazzling Gold. However, it still had a circumference of 1,000 miles. What a dazzling city! Qin Yu sighed. The walls of the entire city were made of golden yellow ores. At a glance, the entire city was as dazzling as a star in the mortal realm. After entering the city, the streets of the city were made of black stone slabs. There were not many people on Mount Dazzling Gold. However, at a glance, all of them were heavenly deity-level experts. It was indeed quite shocking. Compared to them, the 113 heavenly deities that Qin Yu had taken in were nothing. In the east of Mount Dazzling Gold, there is a Gold Sword King Mansion. In the west, there is a 100 Flowers King Mansion. The other two God Kings of our Mount Dazzling Gold live in these two mansions. They are known as the Gold Sword God King and the 100 Flowers God King. Walking on the stone slabs, Huang Fu Jing introduced the two mansions to Qin Yu. Qin Yu remembered this in his heart. He lightly nodded. The heavenly deity army in the city consists of a total of 9 large companies and 9 large captains. In terms of status, they are second only to Imperial Father, the 2 God Kings and the 3 Palace Masters. Huang Fu Jing said with a smile. Qin Yu was able to guess that their Imperial Father was the utmost East Sage Emperor and the 2 God Kings. However, who were these 3 Palace Masters? Brother Qin Yu, the heavenly deity army of Mount Dazzling Gold has 9 large captains. They are all high-level heavenly deities. As for the princess, she is also one of them. Did you know about this? Yuqi Gonglan said to Qin Yu. Huang Fu Jing could only glare at Yuqi Gonglan. I already knew about this. Qin Yu immediately replied. After walking for a long time, Qin Yu and the others arrived at the inner city. This inner city was constructed in the center of Dazzling Gold City. Dazzling Gold City possessed a circumference of 1,000 miles. As for this inner city, it was only 100 miles. This is the Imperial City. My Imperial Father, the members of my family, the 3 Palace Masters and the others all live here. As Huang Fu Jing said those words, she brought Qin Yu and walked toward the Imperial City's gate. Imperial Father has been waiting for you in the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace for a long time now. Let's go. When the guards of the Imperial City saw Huang Fu Jing and the others, they immediately bowed respectfully. Huang Fu Jing brought Qin Yu and the others and directly rushed toward the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace. This imperial city was truly enormous. Its construction and layout were also extremely exquisite. After making many turns, Huang Fu Jing finally brought Qin Yu and the others to the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace. Huff, we've finally arrived. A smile appeared on Huang Fu Jing's face. Qin Yu looked to the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace before him. He felt that his heartbeat had increased slightly. After all, the person he was about to meet was one of the 8 great Sage Emperors, the utmost East Sage Emperor. Chapter 549. The utmost East Sage Emperor's palace was not a single palace hall. Instead, it was an enormous palace with waterside pavilions, gardens and layers upon layers of winding corridors. The utmost East Sage Emperor himself rested, summoned his subordinates, trained and so on. All of these were done in this utmost East Sage Emperor's palace. From this, one could imagine how enormous the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace was. Qin Yu, Huang Fujing, Kuro, Yuchi Gonglan and the others were all outside the entrance of the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace. The entrance of the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace was located in this palace. Even the gatekeepers are stronger than me. Kuro gasped in surprise with a low voice. Qin Yu couldn't help but look to the guards on either side of the entrance. In terms of strength, those two guards were at least mid-level heavenly deities. As for their exact strength, even Qin Yu was unable to determine it. Imperial Father knows that you're coming. He ought to have already prepared to receive you. Huang Fujing said to Qin Yu with a smile. Come, let's go in. As she said that, she began to walk toward the entrance of the palace. One of the guards on either side of the entrance revealed a smile on his face. He said respectfully, Princess, His Majesty Sage Emperor has already given the order. When Lord Qin Yu arrives, he is to be directly brought to the South Pavilion, Waterside Pavilion. Huang Fujing lightly nodded. Then, she brought Qin Yu and the others into the palace hall. The palace hall was very spacious. It was over 20 meters wide. Normally, the utmost East Sage Emperor would discuss official matters here. There were passageways on both sides of the palace hall. Qin Yu and the others entered the passageway on the right. Big brother, I feel that this place is very, very strange. Kuro's voice sounded in Qin Yu's mind. Qin Yu looked to Kuro beside him. He then looked to the surroundings and said via divine awareness voice transmission. Xiao Hei, the entire utmost East Sage Emperor's palace is covered by the utmost East Sage Emperor's divine awareness. He is observing us all the time. If the utmost East Sage Emperor were to hear what Qin Yu said, he would definitely be incomparably shocked. Big brother, you're able to sense the Sage Emperor's divine awareness? Kuro immediately asked via divine awareness voice transmission. Qin Yu was able to sense the divine awareness of God Kings? Facing Kuro's doubts, Qin Yu nodded slightly. My Chenkuan world spatial energy is constantly deployed around my body. If someone wants to investigate me, they definitely won't be able to escape my detection. Qin Yu was incomparably confident. As Qin Yu was the creator of the Chenkuan world, Qin Yu would instantly know of any changes in the area covered by the Chenkuan world spatial power. As for the utmost East Sage Emperor, he was unable to detect the spatial energy surrounding Qin Yu. Firstly, the spatial energy was the spatial energy of the Chenkuan world. The utmost East Sage Emperor himself knew nothing about the spatial laws of the universal world. Secondly, Qin Yu's control of the spatial power of the Chenkuan world had reached a superb level. It invaded the surroundings like the spring wind and rain, but no one could detect it. However, if the two of them were to fight, the utmost East Sage Emperor, who had comprehended the laws of space, would be able to instantly utilize the spatial energy of the entire deity realm. As such, Qin Yu was far from being a match for him. Listening to the gurgling sounds of flowing water, they walked along the stone path for a while before arriving at the entrance of a courtyard. We've arrived. Imperial Father is inside. Huang Fujing said with a smile. Qin Yu nodded his head slightly. He couldn't help but reveal a hint of a smile on his cold face. Qin Yu and Huang Fujing walked side by side. Kuro, Yuchi Gonglan, Uncle Fu, Qiuzhong Fu and the others followed behind them. After entering the courtyard, they saw that it was actually a large pool of water. Above the pool, there was a narrow passageway. Following this passageway, they could reach an exquisite building above the water. While they were still far away, Qin Yu could hear the sounds of chatting and laughter coming from the exquisite building. There are quite a few people here. Huang Fujing said to Qin Yu with a smile. At the same time, she increased her pace and brought Qin Yu directly into the building. After that, they went up to the second floor. The second floor was filled with windows. Even the roof was only half open. The other half was empty. There were 6 people seated on the second floor. 3 men and 3 women. They were a gentle-looking middle-aged man, 2 beautiful women, a very lively little girl, and 2 men who were as frightening as tigers. Imperial Father, Qin Yu is here. Imperial Mother, Auntie. Huang Fu Jing giggled as she greeted them. Yuchi Gonglan said respectfully, "Greetings, Your Imperial Majesty, Your Imperial Majesty, Your Imperial Majesty, Your Imperial Majesty." Yuchi Gonglan only bowed to the 3 of them. The other 3 just smiled and nodded. "Qin Yu, let me introduce you," Huang Fu Jing said warmly. "This is my Imperial Father, the Far East Holy Emperor." Qin Yu's gaze locked onto this middle-aged, gentle-looking man. This gentle-looking man was wearing a soft golden robe, and he had a smile on his face. "Qin Yu pays his respects to Your Imperial Majesty, Your Imperial Majesty." Qin Yu bowed as well. The Far East Holy Emperor, Huang Fu Yu, had carefully inspected Qin Yu as soon as he had entered. The result of his inspection shocked him. Qin Yu actually still had the aura of divine force within his body. "Qin Yu, your divine force has yet to transform into Empyrean divine force?" The Far East Holy Emperor said with a hint of surprise in his voice. "Divine force?" The lively little girl seated next to him immediately said in surprise. Even the other 2 men stared at Qin Yu in astonishment. A grandmaster who was so skilled in formations actually had divine force within his body? Qin Yu nodded. "Yes, Your Imperial Majesty. Normally, I spend most of my energy on formations. I don't pay much attention to the energy within my body." "So that's the case. No wonder you were able to achieve such results." The Far East Holy Emperor nodded, then said to a beautiful woman by his side, "Liu Xiang, what do you think of Qin Yu?" The Far East Holy Emperor immediately introduced her to Qin Yu. "Qin Yu, this is the 100 Flowers God King." Qin Yu immediately began to carefully inspect this beautiful woman. This beautiful woman was wearing a pink gown. In between her eyebrows, there was a red mole. Her eyes were like limpid autumn waters. This 100 Flowers God King, Huang Fu Liuxiang, carefully inspected Qin Yu. In the end, she smiled and nodded. "Not bad. At the very least, you are much more mature than those 3 sons of yours." The Far East Holy Emperor couldn't help but laugh. 3 sons? Qin Yu glanced at the other 2 men in the pavilion. Could it be that these 2, along with that Huang Fu Lushui, are the sons of the Far East Holy Emperor? At the moment when Qin Yu was thinking, Huang Fu Jing continued to introduce. "Qin Yu, this is my Empress Mother. I pay my respects to Your Highness the Empress." Qin Yu slightly bowed. Although that Empress Mother possessed a high status, her strength could not be considered to be high. She was only a mid-level heavenly deity. For her to be so weak after dual training with the Far East Holy Emperor for so many years, it meant that her comprehension ability was truly lacking. That Empress Mother also slightly nodded to Qin Yu. "This is my younger sister, Ling Huang Fu Ling. This is my big brother, Huang Fu Lai Jun. This is my second brother, Huang Fu Liehua. As for my third brother, you've already met him." Huang Fu Jing introduced her siblings very simply. Qin Yu slightly bowed. Huang Fu Liehua and Huang Fu Lai Jun both possessed a head of dazzling short golden hair. Their auras were both extremely astonishing. Merely, Huang Fu Liehua's hair and beard were all fluttering. From a single glance, one could tell that he was an irascible person. Huang Fu Liejuan's short hair was like steel needles. However, he appeared to be very resolute and steady. Merely, when he opened and closed his eyes, he was emitting an aura of disdain for the entire world. This utmost East Holy Emperor's sons and daughters are all extraordinary. Qin Yu gasped in admiration in his heart. 3 sons and 2 daughters. All of them are so powerful. Qin Yu did not know about the 8 great divine families. The 8 great divine families were different from the mortals that had trained their way up. The bloodlines of the 8 great divine families were extremely important. The first generation of the 8 great divine families possessed the best bloodlines. As such, their accomplishments would be even higher. After passing down their bloodlines from generation to generation, the later they grew, the thinner their bloodlines would become. As such, it would be extremely difficult for their accomplishments to reach a higher level. For example, the Zhang family of the utmost northern region's floating snow city. Zhang Lan and Zhang Fan were both sage emperors. Even Zhang Xing was only a generation younger than them. As for the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold, the Hundred Flowers God King, the utmost East Holy Emperor and the Gold Sword God King, Huang Fu Lei, were also blood siblings. For the first generation of the 8 great divine families, the difficulty of their cultivation was much lower. Where were the parents of the utmost East Sage Emperor, the utmost North Sage Emperor and them? Other than the utmost East Sage Emperor, the utmost North Sage Emperor and them, even their children did not know about it. This could also be considered as a secret of the divine realm. The 8 great divine families possessed both advantages and weaknesses. For example, the first generation of the 8 great divine families, although their numbers were extremely small, over half of them were god kings. As for the rest, they were high-level heavenly deities. As for the second generation, it was extremely rare for a god king to appear. As for the third generation and beyond, it was extremely difficult for a god king to appear among them. The only exception was if they possessed a very strong perseverance. What about the mortals? Although the difficulty of their cultivation was extremely high, their potential was also extremely great. Regardless of which generation they were from, when they reached the later stages of their cultivation, they all possessed a trace of hope of becoming a god king. Big sister, I've heard that you have a very good impression of that Qin Yu. Huang Fu Ling's large eyes looked to Huang Fu Jing and then to Qin Yu. Huang Fu Jing glared at Huang Fu Ling. Imperial Father, since you've invited this Qin Yu, what position do you plan to give him? That Huang Fu Liehua asked casually. Regarding this point, I do have an idea. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu smiled and said, You all should know that within the Imperial City, there is the utmost East Sage Emperor Palace, as well as the other 4 palaces, the Misty Mystic Palace, Black Wind Palace, Lai Jun Palace and Heaven Desolate Palace. However, currently, there are only 3 palace masters. Among them, the Misty Mystic Palace is empty. There has been no one capable of taking on the position of the Misty Mystic Palace Master. Thus, I'm thinking, second brother. The Hundred Flowers God King's eyelids twitched as her aura instantly turned sharp. Second brother, the reason why the Misty Mystic Palace is empty isn't because there is no one capable of taking on the position. Instead, it's because the competition is too intense. Thus, there has been no conclusion. The position of Palace Master is second only to God Kings. Second brother, you cannot so easily give it to a newcomer without any qualifications. The Hundred Flowers God King objected. A God King objected, causing the utmost East Sage Emperor to be unable to continue speaking. The 3 God Kings of the utmost East's Mount Dazzling Gold were Huang Fu Yu, Huang Fu Lei and Huang Fu Liuxiang. Among the 3 of them, only Huang Fu Liuxiang was a woman. Normally, her 2 brothers would always yield to this little sister of hers. Second brother, look, the palace masters of the Black Wind Palace and Heaven Desolate Palace are all people who had rendered great service in the incomparable calamity 6 quadrillion years ago. They are extremely old and their strengths are also peak high-level heavenly deities. No one would object to them becoming palace masters. This Lai Jun Palace is even specially created for the eldest prince, Huang Fu Lai Jun. In all these years, the eldest prince has been leading the heavenly deity army and fighting all over the world. On top of that, with his status, no one would object to him becoming a palace master. Merely, you're using a newcomer. The Hundred Flowers God King Huang Fu Liuxiang shook her head. Evidently, Huang Fu Liuxiang was very dissatisfied. Hearing what the Hundred Flowers God King said, Qin Yu immediately came to understand the status of the utmost East's Mount Dazzling Gold. Evidently, these 4 great palace masters were people second only to God Kings. Their status was even higher than ordinary high-level heavenly deities. If he were to become a palace master, then he would have the confidence to propose marriage to the utmost North Sage Emperor. However, his qualifications were too low. Your Majesty, Qin Yu was the first to refuse. The utmost East Sage Emperor extended his hand to stop her. After that, he smiled and said to the 100 Flowers God King, Liu Xiong, what you said is also reasonable. In all these years, weren't there only 2 people who truly fought for the position of Misty Mystic Palace Master? One is your disciple, and the other is the captain of the Heavenly Deity Army. Huangfu Liuxiang nodded slightly and said, although Shuiyu is a woman, she has followed me for many years. Although he seems unremarkable, he has unknowingly contributed a lot to our Mount Dazzling Gold. In terms of strength, she was also a high-level heavenly deity. She is the palace master of the Misty Mystic Palace, so why not? At this moment, Huangfu Liajun, who had been silent all this time, spoke out. Aunt, Shuiyu is indeed very good. However, my good brother Dong Ho's position in the Heavenly Deity Army is not below mine. Although it is clearly said that I am the commander of the Heavenly Deity Army, I am the one who commands it. In fact, most of the time, it was Dong Ho and his brother who led them. His status, experience and strength are sufficient to become the palace master of the Misty Mystic Palace. Qin Yu merely stood to the side and listened. Evidently, the utmost East Sage Emperor supported him. The 100 Flowers God King supported her disciple. As for Huangfu Liajun and many other people in the Heavenly Deity Army, they only supported that Dong Ho. Big brother, it seems that there are a lot of people fighting over this position. Kuro said via Divine Awareness voice transmission. When I didn't come, the 2 sides were in confrontation. Now that I've come, the utmost East Sage Emperor wants to pass the position to me. Naturally, these 2 sides would not be able to sit still. Qin Yu replied via Divine Awareness voice transmission. He was able to keep his composure. Chapter 550. At this moment, Huangfu Ling, who was sitting beside Huangfu Jing, stood up and said, Imperial Father and, you two should stop fighting. I've heard that this Qin Yu is extremely powerful. The formation arrays that he set up are things that even high-level heavenly deities cannot break through. Big Sister Shui Yu and Big Brother Dong Ho are unable to break through this array formation alone. If Qin Yu becomes the Misty Mystic Palace's palace master, I will raise both my hands and feet in approval. 2 feet, you little girl. The 100 Flowers God King Huangfu Liuxiang also laughed. Qin Yu also looked at Huangfu Ling with a smile. What a cute little girl. At this time, Huangfu Liehua said casually, why make it so complicated? Make it simple. Let them compete with each other. Whoever is stronger will be the hall master. Isn't that settled? Qin Yu, who had been listening carefully, smiled when he heard Huangfu Liehua's words. If it was really a competition, he could directly set up a large formation. No matter how the 2 of them resisted, they would not be able to escape the formation. In the great formation, they were at his mercy. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu Yu's eyes lit up. He nodded and said, all right, then let's use the method of blazing flames to make them. What good? Huangfu Liuxiang interrupted the utmost East Sage Emperor. Huangfu Liuxiang glanced at the utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu Yu and said, Second brother, you clearly know that this Qin Yu is able to set up an array formation space. The chances of Shui Yu and Dong Ho winning are too low, too low. You are deliberately trying to let Qin Yu win. Liuxiang, then what do you think we should do? The utmost East Sage Emperor, Huangfu Yu, looked at Huangfu Liuxiang. Qin Yu also looked at the Divine Monarch 100 Flowers. He did not know what method the Divine Monarch 100 Flowers would come up with to choose the Misty Mystic Palace Master. Huangfu Liuxiang pondered for a moment and said, the Misty Mystic Palace is one of the 4 palaces. Not only does the palace need a palace master, but it also needs a large number of subordinates. Only in this way will the reputation of our Mount Dazzling Gold's 4th palace not be weakened. Since we have subordinates, we must test the overall quality of our subordinates. In that case, we'll have 3 competitions. 1 for the palace master candidates, 1 for the mid-level heavenly deities and 1 for the low-level heavenly deities. Out of the 3 matches, the side that wins 2 matches is the winner. Qin Yu sighed, Dong Ho sighed, and Shui Yu sighed. The three sides took turns to fight, and the side with the most victories was the hall master. What do you think? Huang Fu Liuxiang had a faint smile on her face. Shui Yu was her disciple. As a grand god king, for her to find powerful mid-level heavenly deities and powerful low-level heavenly deities was an extremely easy task. Is that so? The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu frowned. His younger sister was determined to help that Shui Yu. If a divine king was determined to help someone, then the lineup they would send would definitely be very impressive. It would be very difficult for Qin Yu to win. What about Dong Ho? Behind them was practically the entire army of heavenly deities. If they were to select the strongest mid-level heavenly deities and low-level heavenly deities from among them, there would be no need to mention their battle formation. What kind of lineup could Qin Yu send? The utmost East Sage Emperor suddenly said, Qin Yu has come to my Mount Dazzling Gold. I have yet to give him anything. In that case, let me first give him a group of imperial bodyguards. Second brother, you can't side with one person so openly. Huang Fu Liuxiang said with a beaming smile. Regardless of whether it might be Qin Yu, Dong Ho, or my disciple Shui Yu, the people they send must all be invited by them and have obtained their consent. Outsiders cannot impose orders upon them. Regardless of whether it might be me, second brother, or big brother, none of us are allowed to interfere. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu was so angry that he was speechless. Not even helping. Shui Yu had followed the 100 Flowers God King for too long. In the 100 Flowers God King's mansion, who among them did not have a good relationship with Shui Yu? When Shui Yu asked for help, who would not help her? There was no need to mention Dong Ho either. What about Qin Yu? How many people did Qin Yu know? Why would others help Qin Yu? Your Majesty Sage Emperor, there is no need for you to insist on this matter. If I can obtain this position, then I will obtain it. If I cannot obtain it, then it cannot be considered as something that should not be mine. Then, according to what your Majesty 100 Flowers God King has said, the people I send must obtain their consent. Qin Yu said. Huang Fu Liuxiang immediately laughed. Second brother, did you hear that? Even brother Qin Yu himself has agreed. As she said that, Huang Fu Liuxiang even smiled at Qin Yu. Little brother Qin Yu is quite reasonable. The utmost East Sage Emperor took a glance at Qin Yu and sighed. Huang Fu Jing also said to Qin Yu via divine sense voice transmission. She said indignantly, Qin Yu, it is possible that you have accepted some people. However, at the very most, they would be those heavenly deities who are bandits, right? How high could the standards of the people you selected from those people be? Every single one of my aunt's disciples are elites. That Shui Yu is even treated like her own daughter by my aunt. She even has a Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Grand Mist spiritual treasure? Qin Yu was slightly shocked. It would seem that he had underestimated the 100 Flowers God King. For a God King like her to help a disciple, even if she did not do so openly, the amount of power she could mobilize was still extremely terrifying. However, a smile appeared on Qin Yu's face. He was completely confident. The utmost East Sage Emperor could only smile helplessly. He then said, Fine, since this is the case, then it's decided. As for the time of the competition, let's set it at. There's no need to rush. This concerns the position of the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master. We still have to properly prepare for it. How about this, a year later? It's not too late to hold the competition a year later. Huang Fu Liuxiang immediately said. The utmost East Sage Emperor was truly unable to dissuade his younger sister. He could only nod and say, Good, good. A year later, on this day a year later, the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace will be decided. Second brother, it's decided then. In that case, I'll take my leave first. Huang Fu Liuxiang stood up with a smile on her face. When Huang Fu Liuxiang walked past Qin Yu, she even lightly smiled to Qin Yu and said to him via divine sense voice transmission. Little guy, you must properly work hard. Don't let your people lose too miserably. After that, This 100 flowers God King left just like that. A year. Qin Yu thought in his heart. A year in the outside world is 100 years in the second layer space of the Zhonglan's realm. Even if 100 years is not enough for my divine energy to completely transform, it is more than enough for me to refine the magnificent lotus clone. The magnificent lotus clone, Qin Yu had wanted to refine it since a long time ago. According to the records in the bewitching God Temple scrolls, once the magnificent lotus clone was refined, one's body would be indestructible. After all, the 9-petaled magnificent lotus was equivalent to a second-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. The core of the 9-petaled magnificent lotus, the lotus core, was incomparably hard. A clone refined from the lotus core would definitely surpass a high-quality heavenly divine artifact in terms of hardness. Furthermore, the magnificent lotus clone possessed a special domain. With this magnificent lotus clone, even if I were to fight against a high-level heavenly deity, I would not fear them. Qin Yu was extremely confident. With a hardness surpassing that of a high-quality heavenly divine artifact, even spatial cracks would not be able to tear it apart. The magnificent lotus avatar was, in essence, a humanoid grand mist spiritual treasure. However, it is not worth taking out this magnificent lotus clone during the competition. There was simply no need for him to take out the magnificent lotus clone unless it was a crucial moment. This was especially true for the magnificent lotus clone. Once it was paired with the divine spear waning snow and the ability to teleport, it would be extremely formidable. Its defense, attack, speed, all of them would be top-notch. An existence like this was completely capable of sweeping through high-level heavenly deities. Even when faced with god kings, it would be able to fight against them. This was Qin Yu's strongest strength. Merely, this strength was something that Qin Yu would not easily reveal. Without the magnificent lotus clone, Qin Yu's weakest aspect was his own defense. No matter how tough his body was, it would still not be able to withstand the destruction of space. His body was not a grand mist spiritual treasure. What's important is to refine the magnificent lotus clone. Qin Yu thought in his heart. After the utmost East Sage Emperor has arranged a residence for me, I will begin to concentrate on refining the magnificent lotus clone. Qin Yu. At this moment, the utmost East Sage Emperor spoke. Qin Yu immediately woke up from his pondering. I am also very happy that you are willing to come to our Mount Dazzling Gold. I have already prepared a gift for you. I hope that you will like it. The utmost East Sage Emperor waved his hand and a large black chest appeared in the pavilion. Not only Qin Yu, even the others were looking at the large black chest with confusion. The utmost East Sage Emperor would definitely not be ordinary. What was inside the chest? Qin Yu, feel free to open it, said the utmost East Sage Emperor with a smile. Thank you, Your Majesty Sage Emperor. Qin Yu did not refuse. He immediately took a step forward and opened this large black chest in a well-behaved manner. Clang! The chest was opened. Other than the utmost East Sage Emperor who was looking at Qin Yu with a smile on his face, the others all looked toward the chest. Golden scrolls. The chest was filled with golden scrolls. With a single sweep of his divine awareness, Qin Yu discovered that there were over 1,000 golden scrolls in the chest. At this moment, Qin Yu felt a burst of joy in his heart. To ordinary heavenly deities, what was the most precious thing? Not God's spiritual stones. Rather, it was these books. The golden scrolls contained the experiences of many seniors. For example, Qin Yu. If he did not have the 900 scrolls of the Array Tao, how could he have stepped through the gates of the Tao of Arrays? If he did not have some understanding of the Tao of Arrays, most likely, he would not even be able to understand the principles behind a level 8 formation. If he did not understand it, even if he knew the spatial laws of the universal world, he would not be able to set up a formation space. As for some heavenly deities, they would be incomparably happy upon receiving a golden scroll. Your Majesty Sage Emperor, what is inside? Qin Yu asked in astonishment. The utmost East Sage Emperor revealed a trace of a smile on his face. These are all the scrolls that my Mount Dazzling Gold has regarding the Tao of artifact forging. These are the books regarding artifact forging. Of course, the books on formations are not included. If I were to ask you to read the books on formations, that would be a joke. They are all related to the Tao of artifact forging. Qin Yu found it hard to conceal the astonishment in his heart. Right. They are all related to artifact forging. The utmost East Sage Emperor said with a smile. The utmost East Sage Emperor's intention in inviting Qin Yu over was very clear. He hoped that Qin Yu would be able to forge artifacts. A Grandmaster of Array Formations was not very useful. However, a Grandmaster of artifact forging, especially one who had reached the level of Craftsman God, was extremely useful. It was very possible for a Grandmaster of Array Formations to become a Grandmaster of artifact forging. Qin Yu glanced at Uncle Fu beside him. Uncle Fu's eyes were also filled with excitement. Although the Craftsman God Cheho Yuan was very powerful in the Tao of artifact forging, those were the Tao of artifact forging that he had researched by himself. There were a total of over 400 scrolls regarding artifact forging. Although the Craftsman God Cheho Yuan was very powerful in artifact forging, it was not because of his astonishing accomplishments in the Tao of artifact forging. It was because of his astonishing accomplishments in the field of array formations. In terms of the Tao of artifact forging, when compared to the Huangfu clan that had existed since the birth of the Divine Realm, Cheho Yuan was not necessarily stronger. Collecting the best points of 100 schools of thought, it's always good to read more. Qin Yu very happily collects this large black chest with a wave of his hand. Thank you, Your Majesty Sage Emperor, for bestowing this upon me. I will definitely do my best to research it. I am still very interested in artifact forging, Qin Yu said with a smile. Hearing Qin Yu's words, the utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu immediately laughed heartily. What he wanted was for Qin Yu to forge artifacts. Jing, arrange for the empty mansion in the Western District that belonged to me to be given to Qin Yu. Immediately bring him over to receive it. In the future, let him live there. The utmost East Sage Emperor said with a smile. Huangfu Jing immediately stood up and said happily, Yes, Imperial Father. Yuchi Gonglan had already left to see his old friends. As for Qin Yu and his group, they were being led by Huangfu Jing and Huangfu Ling and left the Imperial City and began to walk toward the Western District. Due to the fact that there weren't a lot of people in the dazzling Gold City, although the city possessed a circumference of over 1,000 miles, there were still many places for everyone to live in. This caused everyone's residences to take up quite a large amount of space. Qin Yu, you shouldn't have agreed to it that easily back then. Although my aunt is a bit overbearing at times, as long as you continue to speak, my aunt would always take a step back. Right now, with only your own people, how are you going to fight for the position of the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master? Huangfu Jing felt regret for Qin Yu. Huangfu Ling also firmly nodded her head in agreement. Right when Qin Yu was about to say something, suddenly, Big Brother, leave the battle of the low-level heavenly deities to me. Kuroa's voice sounded. Qin Yu looked to Kuro. Even he was unable to see through Xiao Hei's flowing light spear path. Qin Yu was also looking forward to the scene of Xiao Hei fighting against others. Okay, I'll leave the battle of the low-level heavenly deities to you, said Qin Yu with a smile. Uncle Fu, after we return to the mansion, you will be in charge of everything in the mansion. I will also release those heavenly deity servants. After we return, I plan to enter seclusion training for a period of time. On the road, Qin Yu said to Uncle Fu. Yes, Master, said Uncle Fu respectfully. In Qin Yu's heart, he had been worried about the magnificent lotus clone the entire time. It was so much so that other than the magnificent lotus clone, Qin Yu had also thought about that golden bead. That golden bead, when my soul was at the Jin Dan realm, my soul did not dare to touch it. Now that my soul has reached the nascent soul realm, I should be able to refine it. Qin Yu became even more excited. Magnificent lotus clone, that golden bead that he had never heard of before. Once he refined those two items, what would they bring him? Chapter 551. As Qin Yu walked, He was thinking about how to bind the magnificent lotus clone and the golden pearl. Unknowingly, he had walked for quite a while, when suddenly, he heard a burst of sweet laughter and playful laughter from up ahead. Qin Yu couldn't help but stop his thoughts and look into the distance. A group of beautiful, eye-catching women had appeared on the street. They were laughing and chatting with each other without the slightest scruple. They didn't care about the people around them at all. These 10 women walked side by side on the street, taking up more than half of the entire street. Even some of the Empyrean deities were walking along the side of the road to avoid them. Clearly, most of the people around them were afraid of this group of women. Princess Jing, who are these people? Qin Yu asked, puzzled. Huang Fu Jing was surprised. Why did Qin Yu only address her as Princess Jing? In the Holy Emperor's palace, he would very formally address her as Princess Huang Fu Jing. But Huang Fu Jing didn't mind. She looked up ahead, frowning slightly. Those women are members of the 100 Flowers Palace. Although my aunt is a god king, she spoils her disciples very much. This is why these women don't know how high the heavens are or how deep the earth is. Most likely, aside from the god kings and the 3 palace masters, they don't even care about a princess like me. Huang Fu Ling wrinkled her little nose as well. She said unhappily, those women are relying on the fact that my aunt spoils them. They really are a group of evil women who don't know how high the heavens are or how deep the earth is. Of my aunt's disciples, only the earliest ones are a bit better. Qin Yu and Kuro exchanged a glance, but they didn't say anything. They had just arrived at Mount Dazzling. They couldn't make too many enemies. Oh my, Princess Jing, Princess Ling, what brings you 2 princesses to the west side of the city? A voice so sweet that it made one's heart tremble rang out. A red-robed woman with a misty gaze was the first to speak. The west side of the city was where the 100 Flowers Palace was located. In the west side of the city, the disciples of the 100 Flowers Palace could be said to be tyrannical, with no one daring to do anything about them. Everyone knew how protective the God King of 100 Flowers was. Before Huang Fu Jing could say anything, a green-clothed young lady spoke up. Ah, Princess Jing is accompanying these men. Could it be that they are the rumored Formation Array Grandmaster Qin Yu and his group? I wonder which one of you is the Formation Grandmaster, Qin Yu? As he spoke, he looked at Qin Yu and Kuro with his electrifying eyes. I am Qin Yu. Ladies, I still have some important matters to attend to when I return to the residence. I hope that you ladies can make things convenient for me. Qin Yu cupped his hands and said indifferently, Convenient? We didn't stop you. The charming woman in red glanced at Qin Yu with a smile on her face. If you want to leave, can't you go to the side? The dozen or so women lined up side by side, and the road was only 2 or 3 meters wide. He had the 2 princesses and the Grand Master of Formations that the utmost East Sage Emperor had personally invited to walk by the roadside. The disciples of Duke of Centuria's manor were indeed arrogant. Huang Fu Ling immediately snorted coldly, wanting to say something. After all, she was a princess. Princess Ling, there's no need to argue with them. Qin Yu smiled and walked to the side of the road. The disciples of Centuria Manor, who were laughing and waiting for Qin Yu's group to get angry, saw that Qin Yu wasn't going to fight with them. Immediately, the smiles on their faces disappeared, and the green-clothed girl said rudely, Stop right there. Qin Yu's group suddenly stopped. Even Qin Yu frowned. Chozhong Fu, who had been silent all this time, narrowed his eyes and turned to look at the group of rudely rude women. Shut up. Huang Fu Ling suddenly turned around, her little eyes wide open. What are you, a disciple, being so arrogant for? Qin Yu is the Formation Grandmaster that my father personally invited. You people are so arrogant. Fine. Today, I'll teach you a lesson, bad woman. Let's see how my aunt will protect you. As Huang Fu Ling said those words, a green whip appeared in her hand. She turned into a blur, and the green whip in her hand directly covered the several tens of meters of space. That green-clothed girl was the weakest among this group of disciples. She was only a low-level heavenly deity. As for Huang Fu Ling, she was a mid-level heavenly deity. Merely, the green-clothed girl was extremely spoiled by the Centauria God King. That was the reason why she was so arrogant. Stop! A shout was heard. A white-clothed long-haired woman extended her sword with the intention of stopping the green-clothed girl. Her sword had indeed blocked the long whip. However, pow! The long whip coiled around the sword. The end of the long whip suddenly extended and ruthlessly lashed onto the green-clothed girl's face. As for the green-clothed girl, she remained motionless and allowed the long whip to strike her face. It wasn't that she didn't want to move, rather, she couldn't move. At the same time Huang Fu Ling attacked, she had already unleashed her spatial domain and restricted her movements. The sound was incomparably sharp and clear. A whip mark appeared on the green-clothed girl's delicate face. Blood was also seeping out from it. You. That green-clothed girl pointed at Huang Fu Ling angrily. Tears were rolling down her cheeks. It seemed like she was about to cry. What about me? What about me? At this moment, Huang Fu Ling had already revealed her unruly nature. She slightly raised her chin and proudly looked to that green-clothed girl. Although you all were arrogant in the past, you've never reached such a state. Today, I, my older sister and Qin you are all together. Yet, you all are still this arrogant. If I don't hit you, who would I hit? Even if my aunt was here, she would not be able to help you all. At this moment, that red-clothed charming woman pulled the green-clothed girl's hand and said to her through voice transmission, Little Shuang, Huang Fu Ling and Huang Fu Jing are, after all, my lord's nieces. Restrain yourself. The green-clothed girl could only lightly nod her head and did not say anything else. Among this group of people, who would want to provoke these two princesses? Although they were not very respectful toward the two princesses, they also did not dare to threaten them like this. However, today, they had actually come here deliberately to intercept them. Their purpose was to teach Qin Yu a lesson for their big sister Shui Yu. That was the reason why they were so aggressive. Princess Jing, Princess Ling, we are very respectful toward the two princesses. Merely, when I saw this Qin Yu, I felt extremely puzzled. If my guess is correct, this Qin Yu ought to be a low-level heavenly deity who has yet to completely transform his divine energy. A low-level heavenly deity like him, how could he possibly be a formation grandmaster? Said the red-clothed charming woman with a sweet smile. The smile on Qin Yu's face finally rose. He finally realized that this group of women had come here to cause trouble for him. It was likely that this was related to that 100 Flowers God King's disciple, Shui Yu. I've heard that he even wants to become the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master. Do you know how revered the 4 great Palace Masters are? The Black Wind Palace Master, the Heaven Desolate Palace Master and the Lai Jun Palace Master. Which one of the 3 great Palace Masters do not possess outstanding strength and outstanding battle achievements? He, a mere low-level heavenly deity, actually wants to become a Palace Master? The red-clothed charming woman humphed. A purple-clothed woman beside her also humphed and said, I've heard that his formation skills are powerful. However, so what if his formation skills are powerful? With his strength being so weak, how could he possibly convince the masses? A mere low-level heavenly deity who has yet to even completely transform his divine energy, I'm afraid that even little Shuang would be able to easily defeat him. Seeing this group of women being this noisy, Qin Yu started to frown. Princess Jing, Princess Ling, let's go. Ignore this group of crazy women. Qin Yu called out to them. He then began to walk forward with large strides. Seeing that Qin Yu did not attack them even though they were speaking like this, the group of women grew anxious. Qin Yu, you still want to become the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace. You don't even have the courage. Qin Yu, who had walked halfway, suddenly turned his head around. His eyes were like lightning bursting forth. He coldly shouted, Shut up! His voice was like the rumbling of divine thunder. In an instant, it had stunned that group of women. These dozen or so women were very powerful. There was even a high-level heavenly deity among them. The majority of them were mid-level heavenly deities. Merely, They never expected that a mere low-level heavenly deity would dare to be so arrogant. Qin Yu coldly looked to this group of women. He originally did not want to bicker with these women. Merely, these women were too noisy. Whether or not I, Qin Yu, will become the palace master of the Misty Mystic Palace is not something that you people can decide. Instead, it is something that His Majesty the Utmost East Sage Emperor can decide. Furthermore, whether or not my strength is high or low is also not something that you all can measure. If you anger me, then do not blame me for not knowing how to be protective of the fairer sex. Qin Yu's voice was very cold. Chozhong Fu immediately stood beside Qin Yu. His cold gaze swept past that group of women. He also wanted to attack. You dare to teach us a lesson? That red-clothed charming woman was immediately enraged. I was invited here by the Utmost East Sage Emperor. Not only the Utmost East Sage Emperor, the other 7 great Sage Emperors, including the Azure Sea, Dual Domain Island and Mount Blood Demon have all invited me. Remember, I came to Mount Dazzling Gold by relying on my own ability. I do not wish to provoke others. However, I also do not wish for others to provoke me. Do you understand? Qin Yu said coldly. Immediately after, he took a glance at Kuro beside him. Xiao Hei, let's go. Huang Fu Jing and Huang Fu Ling looked to Qin Yu with excitement. If Qin Yu were to truly teach this group of women a lesson, then even though the 100 Flowers God King pampered this group of women, she would still be able to see the big picture and would definitely not make things difficult for Qin Yu. After all, Qin Yu was a talent that all the powers were fighting over. Low-level heavenly deities dare to be arrogant. That group of women were enraged. This group of women did not forget their purpose in coming to intercept Qin Yu. They wanted to insult Qin Yu. The red-clothed charming woman who led the group narrowed her eyes. Then, she burst forth. A silver spear appeared in her hand. She pointed the spear at Qin Yu. Clang! The spear let out a dragon's roar. The space surrounding the spear seemed to be wiggling. Impudent! Huang Fu Jing, Huang Fu Ling, Chozhong Fu, Kuro and the others all saw the silhouette of the spear. Only Qin Yu acted as if he did not see it at all. He still had his back facing the silver spear. Within the range of the universal world's spatial energy, nothing could escape from Qin Yu's observation. A mere mid-level heavenly deity dares to come and take care of me? Qin Yu shook his head in his heart. Huang Fu Jing's eyes grew cold. She was the first to attack. As Qin Yu's personal attendant, Chozhong Fu opened the fan in his hand and leisurely slapped it out. As for Kuro, the black spear in his hand was also shot out like a black dragon leaving its cave. That red-clothed woman's expression changed. In an instant, her attention was completely focused on Huang Fu Jing and Chozhong Fu. These two people were too powerful. However, bang! A black spear seemed to have passed through time and space. It actually managed to deflect the silver spear before Huang Fu Jing and Chozhong Fu. At the same time, the black spear instantly arrived before the red-clothed woman. Ah, impossible! The red-clothed woman only felt that the black spear before her was extremely strange. She only had enough time to let her soul Yuanying and Jade Blood Jin Dan fly out of her body. As for her body, it was instantly pierced through by over a dozen holes. After retrieving the black spear in his hand, Kuro continued to stand beside Qin Yu. That red-clothed woman's soul Yuanying and Jade Blood Jin Dan flew back into her body. She then used a large amount of heavenly divine energy to restore her body. You're a low-level heavenly deity?" said the red-clothed woman in disbelief. Although she did not use her spatial domain earlier, the energy and speed of mid-level heavenly deities were generally much stronger than low-level heavenly deities. She never expected that she would be defeated by a low-level heavenly deity like this. The reason why she did not use her spatial domain was because Huang Fu Jing and Chozhong Fu were beside Qin Yu. "Qin Yu, he's your brother? He's only a low-level heavenly deity?" Huang Fu Jing looked to Kuro in shock. At the same time, she asked Qin Yu. Even Chozhong Fu looked to Kuro in shock. That spear strike from earlier was truly too strange. When Kuro was using his spear, He was even slower than Huang Fu-jing and Qiuzhong Fu. However, when they once again observed Kuro's cloud-piercing spear, they discovered that the cloud-piercing spear had already deflected the silver spear and seriously injured that mid-level heavenly deity. Xiao Hei, flowing light spear path? Qin Yu looked to Kuro. Kuro slightly nodded. This is merely the basic usage of the flowing light spear path. If one were to ask who was able to observe the scene from earlier the most clearly, then it would be Qin Yu. Qin Yu was able to clearly observe that the small region surrounding Kuro's cloud-piercing spear seemed to have been isolated from the rest of the space. Furthermore, when the cloud-piercing spear's speed was already at its limit, its speed had strangely increased by several tens of times. It was a very strange scene. "What are you all doing here?" A gentle yet dignified voice rang out. A woman in a yellow robe floated over to them. That red-clothed charming woman promptly said, "Big Sister Xueyu, we heard that someone was fighting over the position of the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace with you. Thus, we came to see if he possessed the strength to do so." Enough. That Xueyu frowned. Immediately, those dozen or so women grew silent. Qin Yu looked to that Xueyu. Was this the woman who was fighting over the position of the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace with him? She appeared to be a very amiable person. Princess Jing, Princess Ling, this must be the Formation Grandmaster Qin Yu, right? I have already heard about Mr. Qin Yu's great name from my lord. For Mr. Qin Yu to have such accomplishments in the field of formation arrays, Xueyu truly admires you. Xueyu looked to Qin Yu with a smile. She was able to determine who Qin Yu was with a single glance. Qin Yu greets Miss Xueyu. Qin Yu slightly nodded. Today, my sister was in the wrong. Mr. Qin Yu, please don't take it to heart. Xueyu's attitude was extremely humble. It's fine. It's just a small matter. Qin Yu said with a smile. Chapter 552. Xueyu smiled at Qin Yu. Then, she looked at the dozen women and said, "You only know how to cause trouble. Let's go. Go back. Do not be rude to Mr. Qin Yu in the future." As she spoke, Xueyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. That cold light was so cold that it penetrated the bottom of one's heart. Xueyu's back was facing Qin Yu. Logically, Qin Yu should not have noticed. But Qin Yu was surrounded by the Qian Kuan world's space power. The change in Xueyu's eyes was clear to Qin Yu. "Mr. Qin Yu, Princess Jing, Princess Ling, goodbye." Xueyu turned her head and smiled at Qin Yu. Then, she led the group of sisters away. "Xueyu." Qin Yu looked at Xueyu's back. Huang Fu Ling said, "Clearly, her character is different. Sister Xueyu has been with Auntie for a long time. She is much better than those arrogant bad women." "Sister Xueyu is indeed a very good person," Huang Fu-jing said. Qin Yu did not comment. He just felt that the fight for the position of Palace Master in a year would not be so easy. Whether it was Xueyu, who he had just seen, or Dong Ho, who he had not seen, they were not easy to deal with. "Princess Jing, Princess Ling, bring me to my mansion first." "I still do not know where it is," Qin Yu said with a smile. Huang Fu-jing said, "Ah." Then she smiled and said, "Let's go. We are not far from your mansion now." They walked side by side with Huang Fu-jing. As Huang Fu-jing said, they were not far away. After a short while, Qin Yu saw an ancient mansion. It was the Flowing Cloud Mansion. The Flowing Cloud Mansion occupied a large area. Most people would take a detour around the mansion's entrance. The Flowing Cloud Mansion is where Father occasionally rests. Of course, the name Flowing Cloud Mansion was given by Father. After you live there, you can change the name. Huang Fu-jing pointed at the mansion and said, "There are a dozen servants in the mansion. According to the rules, these servants belong to Father. Since you have taken over the mansion, the servants should leave. However, I can see that you don't have many people by your side. If you want these dozen or so servants, I can help you talk to Imperial Father. There won't be any problems." Qin Yu shook his head and said, "No need. I still have some people." Even Huang Fu Jing did not know that Qin Yu had that many heavenly deity servants in his Jianglan's realm. "You have it." Huang Fu Ling was surprised. "I have a spatial artifact. My servant is temporarily living in it." Qin Yu did not hide anything. After all, they would have to know about this matter later. Space artifact? Huang Fu Ling and Huang Fu Jing were shocked. Qin Yu didn't say anything else. Instead, he directly walked towards the drifting cloud manor. When the servant of the drifting cloud manor saw Qin Yu and the others, he immediately shouted, "This is the utmost East Sage Emperor's. Following my father's orders, from today on, this drifting cloud manor shall belong to Mr. Qin Yu." Huang Fu Jing said with a serious voice. The two guards of the drifting cloud manor were startled. Immediately after, they bowed to Qin Yu and the two princesses. They did not believe that the two princesses would dare to falsify the orders of the sage emperor. Huang Fu Jing had those dozen or so servants leave the drifting cloud manor. After she bid farewell to Qin Yu, only Qin Yu and a group of people remained in the drifting cloud manor. Qin Yu immediately summoned all of the 100+ heavenly deity servants. "Uncle Fu, you arrange what they need to do. Chozhong Fu, you assist Uncle Fu." Qin Yu directly ordered. "Yes, master," said Uncle Fu and Chozhong Fu respectfully. Immediately, the entire drifting cloud manor became bustling with noise and excitement. With over 100 people gathered in the manor, it indeed became a bit more lively. Those heavenly deity servants were also very surprised. They had actually arrived at Mount Dazzling Gold, in a courtyard of the drifting cloud manor. This was Qin Yu's residence. At this moment, Qin Yu and Kuro were both here. "Xiao Hei, I plan to refine the magnificent lotus clone. What about you?" Qin Yu looked to Kuro and said. Kuro said, "I plan to enter the Jianglan's realm to continue training. I feel that my flowing light spear path is only at the entry level. I still need to train bitterly." "Xiao Hei, what is the principle behind your flowing light spear path?" Qin Yu asked curiously. Kuro muttered to himself for a moment. He blinked his eyes and said, "How should I say it? Back then, when Big Brother created the universal world, I began to casually attack with my spear in the Jianglan's realm. However, at a certain moment, I suddenly entered into a strange state. It was as if I had touched something. After that, I became immersed in that state. I began to unceasingly attack with my spear and unceasingly sense that state. As time passed, I gradually became familiar with that state. Furthermore, I also sensed a sort of strange rule." Kuro muttered to himself. That sort of rule was entangled with the spatial energy. However, I was able to sense it. As I sensed it more deeply, in the end, I was able to slightly use it. That was how the flowing light spear path came to be. Rule. Qin Yu looked to Kuro in confusion. "As far as I know, other than the various kinds of energy rules, there are also the spatial laws and the highest temporal laws. Your flowing light spear path is extremely strange. Could it be that it's the temporal laws?" "No, that's impossible." Qin Yu shook his head repeatedly. Qin Yu knew very well that the most powerful temporal laws could only be comprehended after reaching the God King level. If one did not comprehend the spatial laws, then it would be impossible for one to comprehend the temporal laws. In the history of the divine realm, only God Kings were able to comprehend the temporal laws. This was an iron law. Actually, Kuro was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I also sensed that I am able to slightly change the flow of time in the area surrounding my spear." "Flow of time?" Qin Yu looked to Kuro in shock. "Monster! To change the flow of time, wouldn't that mean that one had a slight comprehension of the temporal laws? However, how could that be possible? Even high-level heavenly deities would not be able to comprehend the temporal laws in the slightest." Kuro smiled bitterly and helplessly. "I also do not know why my flowing light spear path is like this. I also do not believe that I am able to comprehend the temporal laws. After all, my comprehension of the spatial laws has only allowed me to fly. However, it is true that I am able to change the flow of time in the area surrounding my spear. Qin Yu lightly nodded. Well then, Xiaohei, from today on, you are to properly study the flowing light spear path. However, unless it is a critical moment, do not use the flowing light spear path. While high-level heavenly deities might not be able to sense the profoundness of your spear technique, God King level experts should be able to. At that time, it would be troublesome. Qin Yu frowned. God King level experts, after completely comprehending the spatial laws, would study the temporal laws the entire time. Kuro also nodded. Big brother, rest assured, I will not rashly use the flowing light spear path. Qin Yu patted Kuro's shoulder. He laughed loudly and said, however, if you want to use it, then use it. It's not a big deal. If there is truly a God King that wants to study you, then I'll directly have you enter the universal world. I shall see how the God King will find you then. When I master the magnificent Lotus clone, I will be able to easily escape from the hands of God Kings. Qin Yu was instead filled with confidence. Soon after, Qin Yu took out the Zhonglan's realm and placed it directly on the ground of the courtyard house. At this moment, the Zhonglan's realm had turned into specks. Xiaohei, you should enter the Zhonglan's realm and train first. It's better to place the Zhonglan's realm in the divine realm. If you were to place the Zhonglan's realm in the universal world, then Wu Lan and them would not be able to sense the divine tribulation. Qin Yu said with a smile. After a year, they would have spent 100 years in the second layer space of the Zhonglan's realm. At that time, it would not be long before their divine tribulation. Kuro nodded. Oh, that's right, Xiaohei, I still have 4 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. Including my divine sword Scarlet Blood, which high-quality heavenly divine artifact do you want? With a flip of his hand, 4 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts appeared before Qin Yu. Among them, there was a spear-shaped artifact. Kuro, on the other hand, did not mind. He smiled and said, for the time being, I do not need it. The cloud-piercing spear is very suitable for me. Even now, I still do not know exactly what this cloud-piercing spear is made of. It's rather tough. It's definitely comparable to a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact. Merely, it does not possess the slightest bit of amplification effect. Regardless of whether it was a divine artifact or a heavenly divine artifact, they generally all possess the ability to amplify one's power. However, Kuro's cloud-piercing spear and Ho Fei's black stick were items that they already possessed in the mortal realm. These 2 weapons only possessed a single characteristic: toughness. That's good too. Tell me when you need it. Qin Yu slightly nodded. He then sent Kuro into the second layer space of the Zhonglan's realm. As for Qin Yu himself, he entered the universal world. Inside the universal world, Qin Yu stood in the air. Before him floated a 9-petaled magnificent lotus. The surface of the 9-petaled magnificent lotus was covered with a layer of black light. Especially the black lotus core, the black light was the most dazzling. Beside the 9-petaled magnificent lotus floated a golden bead. Between the golden bead and the black lotus core, energy was being transmitted to each other unceasingly. It was truly incomparably peculiar. Last time, this golden bead nearly froze my soul. This time, it should be a lot better. Qin Yu directly extended his divine awareness and covered the 9-petaled magnificent lotus and the golden bead. Cold, cold that could freeze one's soul. Qin Yu's soul yuanying also shivered. Fortunately, it was only cold and had not reached the level of instant freezing like last time. His soul yuanying was still bearable. Qin Yu looked to the black lotus core in surprise. Not only was the golden bead that cold, even the black lotus core was extremely cold. Merely, in terms of coldness, the black lotus core was slightly weaker. However, the black lotus core possessed a soul aura. That was the soul body that the black lotus core gave birth to. This world is truly filled with all sorts of strange things. Even a plant is capable of giving birth to a soul body without any consciousness. Qin Yu gasped in admiration. Immediately, 2 drops of blood flew out from Qin Yu's fingertips. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart. The blood on the fingertips was the blood of the heart. Those 2 drops of blood landed on the golden bead and the black lotus core respectively. The golden bead and the black lotus core both absorbed that drop of blood. Rumble, the black lotus core directly rolled down from the lotus seed head. Immediately after, the black lotus core and the golden bead actually started to shine and revolve around each other. Could it be? Qin Yu had a thought. Immediately after, he shook his head and said, "Forget about it. Let's try to absorb the flower paste aura first." Qin Yu, the black lotus core and the golden bead suddenly disappeared. As for the 9-petaled magnificent lotus that had lost its black lotus core, it was placed by Qin Yu in a secret location in the universal world. That place was the place where Qin Yu specially stored his items. The reason why the universal world was constantly growing bigger was because it was constantly absorbing the flower paste aura and growing. At this moment, Qin Yu had arrived at the border of the universal world. How big was the current universal world? To give an example, even 100,000 immortal, devil and demon realms added together would not be able to match the size of the universal world. From this, one could tell how boundless the universal world was. At the border of the universal world, Qin Yu stood at the border of the land. In front of him was a layer of membrane. Beyond that was the boundless flower paste space. This layer of membrane, other than Qin Yu, no matter how powerful the others were, they would still not be able to break through it. This flower paste aura and the dark and yellow energy are both so strange. The dark and yellow energy cannot leave the universal world. This flower paste aura is also the same. Qin Yu felt extremely helpless. Otherwise, he would have already brought the dark and yellow energy and the flower paste aura into the Jianglan's realm. However, that was not possible. The flower paste aura originated from the flower paste space. As for the dark and yellow energy, it seemed to be closely related to the changes in the universal world. The black lotus core and the golden bead that were revolving unceasingly was like a Tai Chi Qin Yu controlled a strand of flower paste aura to approach them. Immediately, it was absorbed by the Tai Chi. With an extremely astonishing speed, that strand of flower paste aura was completely absorbed by the black lotus core and the golden bead in merely a day's time. So fast. Qin Yu was stunned. When he was refining the refining flame wristband and so on, it still took him over a dozen years to absorb that much flower paste aura. The flower paste aura could be said to be boundless. Now that the universal world had reached an astonishing size, the amount of flower paste aura that it absorbed every moment had reached a frightening amount. Thus, Qin Yu would naturally not be stingy. A strand of flower paste aura allowed me to refine it to 50%. Another strand. Although Qin Yu did not understand the reason, he did not bother to study it. Another strand of flower paste aura flew over. At this moment, the Tai Chi formed by the revolving black lotus core and golden bead began to slow down. After spending close to a month's time, more than half of the flower paste aura had been absorbed. Qin Yu's refinement had reached 80%. This Tai Chi had stopped absorbing. It's no longer absorbing the flower paste aura? Qin Yu had a feeling in his heart. The black lotus core and golden bead seemed to have been saturated. They were no longer able to absorb the flower paste aura. Merely, neither of these two had been completely refined. At the same time, the speed at which the black lotus core and the golden bead alternated their energies became faster and faster. The black lotus core had a hint of gold in it. The golden bead had a hint of black in it. And this change was still ongoing. The black lotus core is not the black lotus core. This golden bead is not itself. Then, will the magnificent lotus avatar that I refine in the future be the same as what is recorded in the golden scroll? Qin Yu immediately felt a headache coming on. Everything that was unknown was the most worrisome. Qin Yu was also worried. If the magnificent lotus avatar that he was looking forward to was refined using the mutated black lotus core, what would it look like? Chapter 553. Half a year had passed since Qin Yu had arrived at dazzling Gold City. In the misty drizzle, the entire dazzling gold city was shrouded in a hazy mist. In the dazzling gold city, all the well-informed people knew that there was an extraordinary person in the dazzling gold city. Array Grand Master, Qin Yu. In the restaurant, a group of Empyrean gods were drinking wine and chatting casually. In dazzling gold city, Empyrean gods could be seen everywhere. As far as the Empyrean gods were concerned, only the 9 captains, the 3 palace masters and the 3 divine kings were truly respected by them. There's still half a year before the competition. The position of palace master of the Misty Mystic Palace will definitely be Chief Dong's. That 100 Flowers Palace's mother, and that Formation Grandmaster also want to be? Humph, why don't you take a look at what contributions they have? A dark-skinned man with long hair and beard snorted coldly. There were 4 men drinking at the table. Immediately, someone retorted, "Second brother, you can't say that. Lady Shui Yu was also a high-level heavenly deity. She was extremely powerful. It's that Formation Grandmaster, Qin Yu. He's someone that even Qiuzhong Fu is willing to become his personal attendant. Have you heard of him, Qiuzhong Fu?" The great name of the high-level heavenly deity, Qiuzhong Fu, was extremely resounding in the eastern region of the Divine Realm. That's not all. I've even heard that Mr. Qin Yu's residence, the Drifting Cloud Mansion, has over 100 heavenly god servants. Those heavenly god servants do not belong to our heavenly god army, nor are they part of the royal capital's army. They were personally brought here by Mr. Qin Yu. The skinniest of the 4 sighed and said, "A single person with over 100 heavenly deity servants. Even the city lord of a city isn't that powerful." The other 3 had obviously heard about this as well. So F** King Awesome. Over 100 heavenly deity servants? Where did they come from? Ordinary city masters, for example, the Yuchi city's city master, would only have several tens of heavenly deities under him. Even in dazzling gold city, only the army of heavenly gods, the imperial guards of the imperial city, and the residences of the 2 god kings were capable of finding over 100 heavenly gods at once. Qin Yu. This was the Array Formation Grandmaster who wanted to compete for the position of Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master as soon as he arrived. He had also obtained the support of the utmost East Sage Emperor. Before he even revealed himself, a large number of people in Dazzling Gold City had already started discussing him. Of the 4 Palace Masters, the only one that was empty was the Misty Mystic Palace. Who would obtain the position of Palace Master in the end? Everything was still unknown. Drifting Cloud Mansion. The Drifting Cloud Manor was very lively. Many heavenly deities were gathered together, either chatting or sparring with each other. However, no one dared to approach the courtyard where Qin Yu was cultivating. Inside the courtyard, inside the speck of dust transformed from the Jianglan's realm. The second layer of the Jianglan's realm. The waves covered the sky. The sound of the waves crashing against each other was like the rumbling of thunder. This was an ocean in the boundary region of the second layer space of the Jianglan's realm. At this moment, Qin Yu was sitting cross-legged in the air above the ocean. A slightly black stream of air and a slightly golden stream of air. With Qin Yu as the center, the 2 streams of air started to spin crazily. It formed a Tai Chi shape. Merely, this Tai Chi was much larger than the one in the universal world. Qin Yu only stayed in the universal world for a month. When the black lotus core and the golden bead were no longer able to absorb the flower paste energy, Qin Yu exited the universal world and entered the second layer space of the Jianglan's realm. At the beginning, the black lotus core and the golden bead spinning speed could not be considered to be very fast. However, as time passed, after several tens of years, they had turned into their current appearance. I've already refined over 99%. There's only a tiny bit left. I reckon that in another year, I'll be able to completely refine them. However, Qin Yu's heart was extremely clear. He was still quietly trying his best to refine them. His soul's energy was unceasingly assimilating into the black lotus core and the golden bead. Merely, the current black lotus core and the golden bead had even partially turned into air. Time passed. In a blink of an eye, a year and a half had passed. Qin Yu's estimation was wrong. He had originally thought that he would only need a year. Who would have thought that at the final moment, he would have to consume so much of his soul's energy before finally succeeding? In a year and a half, he had completely refined them. At this moment, Qin Yu was sitting cross-legged on the endless waves. The black lotus core and the golden bead formed a gigantic Tai Chi, revolving around Qin Yu. However, at this moment, the black lotus core and the golden bead had almost completely turned into air. Since you two are naturally attracted to each other, I'll grant you your wish. Qin Yu smiled faintly. Then, with a thought, two streaks of light, like Mars colliding with Earth, collided in front of Qin Yu with a loud bang. When the two streaks of light collided, no sound was produced. The two had fused together. A dense green air was born out of thin air. Qin Yu's consciousness had already attached itself to it. With such a change occurring, Qin Yu's mind was suddenly enlightened. He completely understood. He saw that the dense green air twisted for a while. Then, it turned into a young man with long green hair and a green robe. That young man looked exactly the same as Qin Yu. True body. The young man in the green robe said to Qin Yu with a smile. Then he said no more. Qin Yu smiled faintly. Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out a golden scroll. That green-robed Qin Yu quietly stood beside Qin Yu. Qin Yu read the golden scroll with his consciousness. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Magnificent lotus clone, magnificent lotus clone." According to the description in this scroll, the magnificent lotus clone is as hard as a second-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. What about this variant magnificent lotus clone? The green-robed Qin Yu merely smiled and did not say anything. Qin Yu already knew everything about the magnificent lotus clone. An ordinary magnificent lotus clone was as hard as a second-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. A second-rate grand mist spiritual treasure was already very powerful. It was very difficult to destroy it. Even God Kings would need to use grand mist spiritual treasures and spend a lot of effort to destroy it. What about the variant magnificent lotus clone? It was the fusion of the 9-petaled magnificent lotus black lotus core and the golden bead. In fact, both the black lotus core and the golden bead were second-rate grand mist spiritual treasures. However, both of them were of the cold attribute. When the two were fused, their might instead multiplied. The magnificent lotus clone formed by the fusion of the two was equivalent to a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. A first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure was far more precious than two grand mist spiritual treasures. The fusion of two grand mist spiritual treasures was something that could only be discovered and not sought. It was something that was determined by the heavens, and not something that could be forced by man. It was extremely rare for Qin Yu to be able to obtain both the black lotus core and the golden bead. Extremely hard and easy to break. Even if it were to reach the toughness of a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure, it would not be indestructible. Merely, this variant magnificent lotus clone is. When Qin Yu thought of the usage of his magnificent lotus clone, he became excited. No matter how hard a grand mist spiritual treasure was, once an attack surpasses its limits, it would still be destroyed. However, what about this magnificent lotus clone? Transform into source energy. With an intention from Qin Yu, the magnificent lotus clone transformed into a magnificent lotus clone. The green-robed Qin Yu directly transformed into a dense cyan-colored stream of air. The cyan-colored stream of air drifted about wantonly. Occasionally, it would gather and occasionally, it would dissipate. Right. This was one of the variant magnificent lotus clone's abilities. If the magnificent lotus clone was merely refined with the black lotus core, it would undoubtedly die should the clone's soul be destroyed. However, this variant magnificent lotus clone was different. Even if a god king were to attack with his strongest attack, he would only be able to cause the variant magnificent lotus clone to collapse into cyan-colored streams of air. However, this clone of his could still reform. Undying body. Refinement by the void flames, destruction of space. All sorts of methods were unable to destroy this undying body. Even if Qin Yu's clone were to be trapped in a space, Qin Yu was still able to have his clone instantly return to the universal world. Qin Yu's clone contained a trace of Qin Yu's consciousness. Thus, it was naturally connected to the universal world. With this clone, I will be able to go anywhere in the divine realm. Qin Yu could not help but laugh. The clone's body was as hard as a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. With just its body, it could attack. As for turning into gas, that was something that could only happen when it encountered a God King's strongest attack. If its defense was this powerful, what about its attack? Qin Yu's clone's attacks were not simple physical attacks. It also possessed domain attacks. Cold. The black lotus core and the golden bead were both of the cold attribute. Merely the golden bead was able to nearly freeze Qin Yu's soul. These two grand mist spiritual treasures were two different aspects of the cold attribute. Once they fused, the degree of coldness would be something that even a heavenly deity's soul yuanying would not be able to withstand. The clone created with merely the black lotus core would only possess the golden abyss cold air domain. As for this clone of mine, its domain is the cold mist domain. Qin Yu looked to the cyan-gowned Qin Yu. A layer of deep cyan-colored cold air immediately spread out from the cyan-gowned Qin Yu's body. To the experts of the divine realm, the flames were divided into black divine flames, white pure flames, and void flames. As for the cold air, it was divided into unitary heavy water, cold air, golden elemental heavy water, cold air, and cold mist air. The cold mist air was extremely special. It could take the form of a gas. However, it could also instantly condense into a solid state like ice. Its degree of coldness was something that even a mid-level heavenly deity's spatial domain would only be able to withstand for several breaths of time. This clone should also be considered as one of my powerful grand mist spiritual treasures. Qin Yu thought in his heart. There were many third-rate grand mist spiritual treasures in the divine realm. Although second-rate grand mist spiritual treasures were precious, there were also some. However, first-rate grand mist spiritual treasures were extremely rare. For a God King to possess a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure, it was already something to rejoice about. The two things that Qin Yu was relying on the most right now. One was his clone. The other was the extremely frightening, divine spear waning snow. The divine spear waning snow shouldn't be considered a heavenly divine artifact. Merely, it shouldn't be considered a grand mist spiritual treasure. Qin Yu smiled. I wonder what sort of weapon the divine spear waning snow should be. After absorbing the dark and yellow energy, the offensive power of the divine spear waning snow had reached a frightening level. After successfully mastering the magnificent lotus clone, his strength had increased greatly. He now had another trump card that he could use to move about unhindered in the divine realm. Qin Yu was unable to refrain himself from feeling carefree. Now this is a true clone. Qin Yu suddenly thought of a matter. His eyes shined. Qin Yu looked to his clone. The clone contained a soul. It also possessed a trace of its own consciousness. Thus, it naturally formed a soul. This clone was also capable of training. Furthermore, the results of its training could also be shared with Qin Yu's original body. From today on, this clone shall comprehend the spatial laws left behind by Senior Zhuoqiumei in the Jianglan's realm. With an intention from Qin Yu, a seven-colored light flew out from Qin Yu's mind. After that, it assimilated into the cyan-gowned Qin Yu's mind. Qin Yu had only left half of the comprehension for the cyan-gowned Qin Yu. This half was sufficient for his clone to comprehend for a very long time. Clone and original body. Whatever the clone comprehended, the original body would naturally comprehend. There was no distinction between the two. With a movement of his body, Qin Yu disappeared from the space of the Jianglan's realm. As for his clone, the cyan-gowned Qin Yu, he quietly sat cross-legged on a reef in the middle of the ocean. He began to quietly comprehend the spatial laws left behind by Zhuoqiumei. Eastern region of the divine realm. Dazzling Gold City's western district. Flowing Cloud Mansion. Qin Yu directly appeared in the courtyard of the Flowing Cloud Mansion. He gasped in his heart. This magnificent lotus clone soul is truly valiant. The soul yuanying that it has condensed is much stronger than my own soul yuanying. I reckon that it is comparable to the high-level heavenly deity's soul yuanying. Qin Yu was able to clearly sense the speed at which his clone comprehended the spatial laws. That astonishing speed was much faster than him comprehending it on his own. This was the benefit of having a powerful soul yuanying. Qin Yu was able to clearly sense that his comprehension of the spatial laws was increasing with every passing moment. With a clone, my cultivation speed is also much faster. Qin Yu felt extremely carefree. Qin Yu walked out of the courtyard and saw 2 heavenly deities patrolling the area. When those 2 heavenly deities saw Qin Yu, they were slightly startled. They then immediately bowed and said respectfully, "We pay our respects to Master." "Well then, you 2 continue to patrol." Qin Yu lightly nodded. He then began to walk toward where Uncle Fu was currently located. The heavenly deity servants of the flowing cloud mansion were all extremely well behaved. A portion of them were quietly training. There were also some that were patrolling, guarding and so on. In the entire flowing cloud mansion, one would be able to see heavenly deities appearing one after another. All of the heavenly deities that encountered Qin Yu would respectfully bow to him. This caused Qin Yu to have a sensation of returning to the mortal realm. Back then, when he was in the mortal realm king's mansion, those maids and servants would also respectfully address him as Third Highness whenever they saw him. Merely, those servants back then were all mortals. However, the servants now were all heavenly deities. "Master, congratulations on coming out of your closed-door training." Uncle Fu had already walked out. When he saw Qin Yu, he immediately smiled and congratulated him. Upon thinking of that magnificent lotus clone variation and sensing that his spatial comprehension was increasing all the time, Qin Yu couldn't help but smile and say, "Haha, that's right. Congratulations indeed." Chapter 554. In the main hall, Qin Yu sat on the master seat. Uncle Fu and Qiuzhong Fu sat on the guest seats on either side of him. The 2 heavenly deity maids served tea. Qiuzhong Fu and Uncle Fu glanced at each other. The 2 of them were both able to tell that Qin Yu's current mood was extremely good. Qin Yu waved his hand to dismiss the 2 maids. With a light smile he said, "Uncle Fu, Qiuzhong Fu, how has the flowing cloud mansion been these days? Nothing major has happened, right?" Qiuzhong Fu smiled and said, "It's nothing much. It's just that Princess Jing, Princess Ling and that disciple of the 100 Flowers Mansion, Lady Xueyu, also came. We all told them that Master was in seclusion training, so they also left." "They?" Qin Yu frowned. Qin Yu was able to understand why Huang Fu Jing and her sister had come. However, why would that disciple of the 100 Flowers Mansion, Xueyu, have also come? Toward this Xueyu, Qin Yu was still on guard. Uncle Fu suddenly said, "Master, has your heavenly divine energy successfully transformed?" Uncle Fu knew very well about Qin Yu's matters. He also knew that Qin Yu wanted to find Li Er. Once his heavenly divine energy completely transformed into heavenly divine energy, Qin Yu would be able to open the 3rd layer space of the Jianglan's realm. "Not yet." Qin Yu shook his head and said, "I reckon it'll still be some time before the transformation is complete." As Qin Yu said that, he flipped his hand and the little green pagoda appeared in his hand. Qin Yu once again attempted to open the 3rd layer space of the Jianglan's realm. Jade green-colored heavenly divine energy poured into it. For ordinary people, they would transform their divine energy into heavenly divine energy the moment they stepped into the low-level heavenly deity stage. However, what about Qin Yu? Because he had set up the formation array universe and comprehended the path of evolution for the next stage of the stellar transformation, Qin Yu's soul had reached the peak of the low-level heavenly deity stage. With the assistance of Lu Xing's tear, Qin Yu's soul control was comparable to that of a mid-level heavenly deity. With a control power comparable to that of a mid-level heavenly deity, the speed of the transformation of his divine energy would naturally be astonishingly fast. In just a few short decades, a third of his divinity had been converted into celestial divinity. Is this heavenly divine energy enough? Qin Yu tried, and the small green pagoda also faintly glowed. However, when Qin Yu poured all of his divine power into it, it was still a little lacking. Qin Yu had already forgotten how many times he had tried this. Qin Yu would attempt to open the third layer space of the Zhonglan's realm whenever he was free. Based on the current level of activation, I should be able to activate it when it completely transforms into the divine power. Qin Yu sighed inwardly. I still have to endure it. Endure. Endure until the day when the third layer space of the Zhonglan's realm is opened. Putting away the small green tower, Qin Yu calmed down in the blink of an eye. After being like this for so many years, Qin Yu's endurance was already very strong. Qin Yu looked to Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu, in another 5 months, the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master Selection Battle will begin. There must be 3 candidates for this selection battle. One is me, the candidate for the Palace Master. The other 2 candidates are a mid-level heavenly deity and a low-level heavenly deity. Say, who do you think should be the candidates for the mid-level heavenly deity and low-level heavenly deity? Qin Yu felt very helpless in his heart. Originally, he had planned to have Xiao He as the candidate for the low-level heavenly deity. However, not long ago, Qin Yu found out that Xiao He's flowing light spear path was suspected to be related to the temporal laws. While high-level heavenly deities might not be able to see through the essence of the flowing light spear path, God King level experts would definitely be able to see through it. At that time, during the selection battle, the utmost East Sage Emperor, 100 Flowers God King and even that Gold Sword God King might all appear. If these 3 great God Kings were to discover that a low-level heavenly deity was able to comprehend the temporal laws, the consequences, Qin Yu did not dare to imagine. Qin Yu was not afraid of troubles. However, he was also not fond of troubles. Especially if the 3 great God Kings were to discover Xiao He's secret, it would be very possible for Xiao He to fall into a dangerous situation. Qin Yu did not dare to gamble. He did not dare to have his brother gamble with him. In Qin Yu's heart, the position of the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master was simply incomparable to his brother. Thus, the low-level heavenly deity that would participate in the selection battle absolutely could not be Xiao He. Uncle Fu said in confusion. Master, I remember you saying that the candidate for the low-level heavenly deity would be young Master Kuro. Young Master Kuro's strength is also... Well then, Xiao He needs to train. I will not have him participate in this selection battle. Qin Yu directly said. Hearing what Qin Yu said, Uncle Fu no longer continued to ask. Instead, he looked to Chozhong Fu and said with a smile. Chozhong Fu, you're more familiar with the strength of those heavenly deities. Say, who do you think would be better to choose? Qin Yu also looked to this high-level heavenly deity Chozhong Fu. Chozhong Fu grew silent for a moment and then slowly said. There are a total of 10 mid-level heavenly deities. Among them, the strongest are Egong Shu and Black Dragon. If the 2 of them were to fight to the death, then Black Dragon would be slightly stronger. Qin Yu slightly nodded. He knew that this Black Dragon was Tan Jiu. Merely, very few people knew the name Tan Jiu. As for the low-level heavenly deities, in this period of time, those low-level heavenly deities have also competed with each other. Among them, 2 are the strongest. One is Sui Fu and the other is called Kong Qi. Both of them are peak low-level heavenly deities. At the same time, they also possess some strange skills. Chozhong Fu directly said. Qin Yu slightly nodded. Chozhong, go and order people to call Black Dragon, Sui Fu and Kong Qi over. Yes, Master. Chozhong Fu immediately stood up and walked out of the main hall. He then shouted to a maid nearby. Quickly go and call Black Dragon, Sui Fu and Kong Qi over. In a short period of time, the 9-headed Black Dragon Tan Jiu, Sui Fu and Kong Qi had arrived. Tan Jiu still had the appearance of a thin and dark youngster with scarlet hair and scarlet eyebrows. As for Sui Fu, he was a very robust man. He was close to 3 meters tall and had a stocky build. As for Kong Qi, she was a very sunny youth. We pay our respects to Master. These 3 people all knelt down on one knee and said respectfully, "You can rise." Qin Yu's gaze was on Tan Jiu. "Tan Jiu, are your injuries healed?" Qin Yu had a smile on his face. This Tan Jiu's serious injury was precisely related to him. Tan Jiu was slightly startled. He then said, "I'm more or less completely healed." "You're injured." Chozhong Fu frowned. He looked to Tan Jiu. "If you were injured, would you still be a match for Igong Shu?" A trace of arrogance flashed past Tan Jiu's face. He said coldly, "Even if I were injured, I would still be able to kill Igong Shu. Furthermore, my injuries are more or less completely healed." "More or less?" Qin Yu frowned. "Doesn't that mean that you're still not completely healed? Tell me, how long will it take for you to completely heal?" Tan Jiu said respectfully, "In merely 10 years, I'll be completely healed." Tan Jiu's injury was in his soul. If it were an injury to his body, then he would be able to heal it using only his heavenly divine energy. However, an injury to his soul was extremely troublesome. 10 years. Qin Yu slightly nodded. "Good. After you've chosen your weapon, I'll have you enter the Zhonglan's realm to train for 10 years. Tan Jiu's eyes shined. He looked to Qin Yu. "Weapon?" Qin Yu took a glance at Tan Jiu. With a flip of his hand, he took out 4 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. Of the 4 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts, 1 had the appearance of a long sword, 1 had the appearance of a spear, 1 had the appearance of a battle axe, and the last one had the appearance of an enormous sword. These 4 weapons are all high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. I still value the position of the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master greatly. Tan Jiu, choose a high-quality heavenly divine artifact and use it for the time being," Qin Yu said indifferently. Tan Jiu, Chozhong Fu and the others were all shocked that Qin Yu was able to take out 4 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts at once. High-quality heavenly divine artifacts, even ordinary god kings would not be able to take out 4 of them at once. Tan Jiu had thought that Qin Yu possessed a lot of treasures. However, never did he expect that Qin Yu actually possessed this many. However, upon hearing that Qin Yu wanted him to choose a high-quality heavenly divine artifact and use it for the time being, Tan Jiu couldn't help but feel disappointed. He was only going to use it for the time being. If you were to win the competition, then the high-quality heavenly divine artifact that you chose will be yours," Qin Yu said. Tan Jiu's eyes immediately shined. He then kneeled down on one knee and said respectfully, "Master, please rest assured. As long as my opponent is a mid-level heavenly deity, I will definitely win." At this moment, Tan Jiu had made up his mind. Regardless of who his opponent might be, for the sake of obtaining a high-quality heavenly divine artifact, Tan Jiu would disregard everything else. "You can choose one," Qin Yu said with a light smile. Tan Jiu nodded slightly. He then began to carefully inspect the 4 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. Divine Sword Scarlet Blood. Tan Jiu recognized it. As for the other 3 weapons, he was also able to guess how powerful they were. "I'll choose." Right when Tan Jiu was about to make his decision, Qin Yu spoke. "Let me remind you. This enormous sword is not what it looks like from the outside. This enormous sword can be split into 2 battle blades and a battle sword. The 2 sides of the enormous sword were sharp. This enormous sword was completely capable of splitting into 2 halves and becoming 2 battle blades. After the enormous sword was split into 2 halves, the battle sword that was only 3 fingers wide appeared within the enormous sword." Qin Yu knew very well that each of the 4 heavenly divine artifacts possessed their own advantages. As for the Divine Sword Scarlet Blood, it possessed the special effect of sharpness. As for the battle axe, it possessed the special effect of weight. As for the spear, it possessed the special effect of body shattering. As for the enormous sword, its special effect was instead ordinary. Merely, it was capable of being used as 3. Tan Jiu was capable of transforming into 9 people. This enormous sword just so happened to be suitable for him. Tan Jiu's eyes immediately shined. He immediately picked up the enormous sword and dripped his blood on it to recognize it as its master. After that, the enormous sword directly split into 2 battle blades and a battle sword. Seeing the 2 battle blades and the battle sword in his hand, Tan Zhou's eyes turned red. "Thank you, Master. With this high-quality heavenly divine artifact, regardless of who it might be, I will definitely win," Tan Zhou said resolutely. In order to obtain this high-quality heavenly divine artifact forever, Tan Zhou had already decided to risk his life. Even if he had to use the method of exploding his clones, he, Tan Zhou, must still win. "Good, you can enter the Zhonglan's realm and train at ease." Qin Yu directly sent Tan Zhou into the second layer space of the Zhonglan's realm. Although it was only a bit more than 5 months until the battle for the heavenly divine artifact in the outside world, there were still several tens of years left in the Zhonglan's realm. Qin Yu looked to the other 2 low-level heavenly deities. One was Sui Fu and the other was Kong Qi. The boorish burly man Sui Fu and the sunny youth Kong Qi both had red eyes as they looked at the 3 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts floating before Qin Yu. Humph, low-level heavenly deities also vainly coveting high-quality heavenly divine artifacts? Chouzhong Fu coldly humped. That Sui Fu and Kong Qi immediately woke up. Kong Qi said, "Mr. Chouzhong, we do not dare to have extravagant hopes. Even if you were to give it to us, we would still not dare to take it. I reckon that we would be directly killed by the jealous mid-level heavenly deities." In the divine realm, for a low-level heavenly deity to possess a high-quality heavenly divine artifact was an extremely dangerous matter. Unless they were someone like Qin Yu who possessed the remarkable spatial formation ability. "Well then, I am not giving it to you two. I merely want you two to use it in the battle for the heavenly divine artifact. Of course, if you two were to win and have rendered a great service, I would bestow upon him a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact." Qin Yu directly said. That Sui Fu and Kong Qi were overjoyed. To low-level heavenly deities, a mid-level heavenly divine artifact was already extremely precious. "Master, this Sui Fu and Kong Qi possess different abilities. Looking at these 3 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts, this subordinate believes that this Sui Fu is suited for that battle axe whereas this Kong Qi is suited for that sword. As for which of the 2 is more powerful, this subordinate is unable to determine." Chouzhong Fu honestly said. Qin Yu slightly nodded. "It's very simple. The 2 of you, one will take the heavy battle axe and the other will take the divine sword Scarlet Blood. Then, enter the Zhonglan's realm to battle. Whoever wins will become the candidate for the low-level heavenly deity." Qin Yu directly gave the order. Sui Fu and Kong Qi glanced at each other. Their eyes were filled with battle intent. Then, with slightly trembling hands, the 2 of them received the 2 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. High-quality heavenly divine artifacts, this was likely the first time that the 2 of them had touched them. "Come, let's go to the Zhonglan's realm." Qin Yu stood up. In an instant, Qin Yu, Uncle Fu and the others in the main hall disappeared. Time passed. In a blink of an eye, over 5 months had passed. Qin Yu had also decided on the candidates for the battle. For the mid-level heavenly deity, Tan Zhou would be the one to fight. As for the low-level heavenly deity, Sui Fu would be the one to fight. Even now, when Qin Yu recalled the battle between Sui Fu and Kong Qi, he couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Many of the strange abilities of the Divine Realm's experts were unimaginable. This also caused Qin Yu to be even more cautious in the battle for the heavenly divine artifacts. Although his own people were powerful, the opponent's contestants would definitely not be weak either. Tomorrow was the day of the battle. The entire dazzling gold city was bustling with noise and excitement. Regardless of whether it was the restaurants, tea houses, or the military barracks, the majority of the people were discussing the 3 parties that were about to participate in the battle for the heavenly divine artifacts. These 3 parties were respectively the Formation Array Grandmaster personally invited by the utmost East Sage Emperor, Mr. Qin Yu's side, the high-level heavenly deity Shui Yu's side fully supported by the 100 Flowers Mansion, the super valiant general fully supported by over 90% of the heavenly deity army. The high-level heavenly deity Dong Ho's side. Among these three parties, from an outsider's point of view, Shui Yu and Dong Ho's side had stronger backing and more supporters. Merely, Qin Yu was too mysterious. It was very difficult to determine who would win and who would lose. Tomorrow, under the joint leadership of the utmost East Sage Emperor, the 100 Flowers God King and the Gold Sword God King, these three parties would begin the battle for the heavenly divine artifacts before the majority of the people in the dazzling Gold City. Exactly who would obtain the position of the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master? They would know tomorrow. Chapter 555. The dark curtain of night disappeared and the light of day descended, covering the entire divine realm. At the same time, the dazzling Gold City also welcomed a new day. On this day, the entire dazzling Gold City was bustling with noise and excitement. Outside the Flowing Cloud Mansion, heavenly deities would occasionally pass by and look toward the Flowing Cloud Mansion. They were even chatting with each other. Suddenly, a group of heavenly deities uniformly flew toward the Flowing Cloud Mansion. They directly landed outside the Flowing Cloud Mansion's entrance. The guards of the Flowing Cloud Mansion immediately acted to stop them. This is the Flowing Cloud Mansion. Unrelated people are not allowed to enter. The leader of this group of heavenly deities directly took out a golden title plate. The Sage Emperor has ordered Mr. Qin Yu and the others to proceed to the dazzling Gold City's Northern City Barracks martial practice grounds to participate in the competition for the position of the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master. Mr. Qin Yu, please proceed to the barracks martial practice grounds immediately. This leader's voice was extremely loud. His voice resounded through the entire Flowing Cloud Mansion. As for Qin Yu and the others who were already prepared, they were able to hear it clearly. There were a lot of heavenly deities outside the Flowing Cloud Mansion to begin with. After hearing what the leader of this group of heavenly deities said, they immediately began to chatter with each other. An excited heavenly deity immediately shouted, "The competition will be held at the Northern City's martial practice grounds. Come, let's go there quickly." There were also calm heavenly deities that lightly nodded and said, "Amen." With how large the martial practice grounds are and the peculiar barrier of the dazzling Gold City, it is indeed enough for those experts to battle. In short, this news quickly spread. Actually, it was not only spread from here. This news had also spread from the 100 Flowers Palace and Dong Ho. The dazzling Gold City was not large. There were only that many heavenly deities. Thus, this news soon spread through the entire dazzling Gold City. Dazzling Gold City, Flowing Cloud Mansion's main hall. When Qin Yu, Uncle Fu, Qiuzhong Fu, Tan Jiao and Sui Fu heard the shouts from outside, they immediately stood up. Because they did not plan to have Xiao Hei fight, they also did not disturb Xiao Hei's training. Xiao Hei was still training in the Jianglan's realm. Uncle Fu, Qiuzhong Fu, Tan Jiao and Sui Fu all looked at Qin Yu. Qin Yu smiled and ordered, "Let's go." With Qin Yu in the lead, Uncle Fu and the other three walked out of the drifting cloud mansion just like that. Meanwhile, the group of heavenly deities who had sent the order was still waiting outside. When the leader saw Qin Yu, he immediately bowed and said, "Mr. Qin Yu, the competition will be held at the martial arts practice field." His Majesty the Saint Emperor ordered me to inform you of this news and bring you to the martial arts practice field. "Lead the way," Qin Yu said straightforwardly. "Yes." The Empyrean God Imperial Guard immediately obeyed. The small team of Empyrean gods flew in front of Qin Yu. Qin Yu and the others also flew. As for Uncle Fu, Qiuzhong Fu used his space domain to help him fly. In dazzling Gold City, very few people would fly in the sky above dazzling Gold City. Team Celestial had only done so because of the Sage Emperor's orders. As Qin Yu's group flew, a large number of Empyrean gods below immediately raised their heads to look. "It's Mr. Qin Yu and the others." Immediately, someone recognized Qin Yu's group. Perhaps they weren't familiar with Qin Yu, but they were familiar with Uncle Fu and Qiuzhong Fu, who had frequently appeared in the drifting cloud mansion in the past year. Qin Yu looked down. One Empyrean god after another raised their heads to look at him. Their gazes were filled with worship, jealousy, envy, anticipation. Facing the gazes of so many people, Qin Yu's heart was still relatively calm. In a short while, Qin Yu's group, led by the Empyrean gods, arrived at the army camp in the northern part of the city. As soon as they entered the army camp, they immediately sensed an austere aura. Qin Yu looked at the enormous, pure black army camp in front of him. This army camp took up a quarter of the entire dazzling gold city. Standing in front of this army camp, he felt as though this army camp was an enormous, prehistoric beast that was coiled up. That austere aura was an aura that had been accumulated for countless years. "Uncle Fu, do you know how old this army camp is?" Qin Yu asked Uncle Fu beside him. Uncle Fu said, "It's been too long. When the dazzling gold city was born, this army camp was already formed. In the entire eastern region of the Divine Realm, practically all of the super experts have trained in this army camp." Qin Yu couldn't help but think of Huang Fu Jing and the others. Huang Fu Liehua and Huang Fu Laijun were both from this army camp. Even Huang Fu Jing was currently one of the 9 large captains. Even the descendants of the imperial family needed to train in the heavenly deity army. It was obvious that the majority of the elites of the eastern region of the Divine Realm had stayed in this army camp. As for the high-level heavenly deities, other than Qiuzhong Fu, practically all of them had stayed in this army camp. Right after entering the army camp, Qin Yu saw the large amount of people before him. He couldn't help but sigh. There are truly a lot of people here. "Mr. Qin Yu, the martial practice field is still ahead," the leader of the heavenly deity squad said respectfully. Qin Yu lightly nodded and continued onward. Qin Yu and the others quickly arrived at the martial practice field. The martial practice field was rectangular in shape. It was several thousand meters in length and width. At this moment, several thousand heavenly deities had already gathered around the martial practice field. At the same time, the number of heavenly deities who were spectating was constantly increasing at an astonishing speed. Not long after, the number of heavenly deities had already exceeded 10,000. As long as there were 10,000 people, it would feel like a sea of people. The entire dazzling gold city had a total of 10,000 people. Today, at least 90% of the people in the dazzling gold city had gathered here. As for the people who didn't come, most of them were in secluded cultivation and were delayed. At this moment, there were only 10 or so women in the martial practice field. The one leading them was Shuiyu. Qin Yu and the others also walked over. "Big sister, that Qin Yu is here." Immediately, a woman spoke. Shuiyu also turned her head and looked over. Then, she immediately walked over to Qin Yu. "Mr. Qin Yu, I originally came to your residence to meet Mr. Qin Yu. However, Mr. Qin Yu was in secluded cultivation. We only met again today. Today's contest is only a competition. Everyone is just doing their best. Let's not hurt each other's friendship," Shuiyu said with a smile. Qin Yu also nodded and said, "That's for sure. Miss Shuiyu, where is Lord Hundred Flowers God King?" "Lord God King, Shuiyu suddenly stopped halfway. At this moment, she had already raised her head to look. Not only her, but Qin Yu and the others also looked towards the sky. Over 10,000 heavenly deities surrounding the martial practice field also raised their heads to look. Over 100 people were flying over in a grandiose manner. The one leading them was the utmost East Sage Emperor, Huang Fu Yu. Beside him was his wife. On the right side of the utmost East Sage Emperor was the multicolored clothed Hundred Flowers God King. At this moment, Hundred Flowers God King looked like a young lady in her 20s. She was very dazzling. On the left side of the utmost East Sage Emperor was a resolute and callous man with a golden long sword on his back. Gold Sword God King? Qin Yu's gaze involuntarily gathered on the man with a golden long sword on his back. Generally, God Kings would keep their weapons within their body. For someone like Gold Sword God King to carry one on his back, let alone God Kings, it was extremely rare even among heavenly deities. Qiuzhong Fu transmitted his voice to Qin Yu. Master, among the three great god kings of the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold, this Gold Sword God King was the latest to reach the God King realm. However, this Gold Sword God King is the elder brother of the utmost East Sage Emperor and Hundred Flowers God King. Although he was the latest to reach the God King realm, this Gold Sword God King's strength might instead be the strongest. Oh! Qin Yu couldn't help but look at Qiu Zhongfu in confusion. How did Qiu Zhongfu know? Master, I have been in the divine realm for a very long time, much longer than even the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan. I have also seen the Gold Sword God King in action before. Although the Golden Sword God King was the strongest in terms of strength, he was still the strongest. However, the 8 great sage emperors all possessed 8 clan protection treasures. That was also the reason why the 8 great sage emperors possessed such frightening strength, Qiu Zhongfu said with a voice transmission. Qin Yu couldn't help but smile as he looked at Qiu Zhongfu in surprise. Qiu Zhongfu knew a lot. Clan suppressing treasure? What's that? Qin Yu asked. Qiu Zhongfu said with uncertainty, I only heard rumors. I heard that the reason why the 8 great Saint Emperor clans can exist forever is because of the clan protection treasures of their 8 great Saint Emperor clans. It was said that the power of these 8 clan treasures was extremely terrifying. It's probably second only to the legendary celestial spiritual treasure of the celestial sovereign. Oh! Qin Yu couldn't help himself from taking a glance at the utmost East Sage Emperor. At this moment, as if he sensed Qin Yu's gaze, the utmost East Sage Emperor also looked to Qin Yu. He lightly smiled at Qin Yu with an encouraging expression in his eyes. Qin Yu immediately smiled back at him. The 3 great god kings descended. Behind these 3 great god kings were the Black Wind Palace's Palace Master, the Heaven Desolate Palace's Palace Master and the Lai Jun Palace's Palace Master. Behind them were the elites of the Huangfu clan. Just like that, the majestic several hundred people landed in front of the martial practice grounds. Chairs were already prepared in those places. The utmost East Sage Emperor and the others all sat down. The utmost East Sage Emperor who sat in the middle suddenly stood up. He swept his gaze around and then said with a loud voice, Everyone, the misty mystic palace of our utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold has always been empty. Today is the day where the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace will be determined. There are a total of 3 candidates for the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace. They are respectively the Large Captain of the Heavenly Deity Army, the High-Level Heavenly Deity Dong Ho, the Disciple of the Hundred Flowers Palace, the High-Level Heavenly Deity Shui Yu. As for the last person, he is also the Formation Grandmaster that Qin Yu has just invited, Qin Yu. The utmost East Sage Emperor took a glance at Qin Yu, Shui Yu, Dong Ho and the others. He lightly nodded and said, The rules of today's competition are extremely simple. Each side must send out 3 combatants. One will be a candidate for the Palace Master, one will be a mid-level heavenly deity and one will be a low-level heavenly deity. 2 victories out of 3 matches will be the victory of a group. First, Shui Yu's side will fight against Qin Yu's side. Then, Qin Yu's side will fight against Dong Ho's side. Finally, Dong Ho's side will fight against Shui Yu's side. There will be a total of 3 groups with a total of 9 matches. As long as any side obtains victory in 2 matches, they will obtain the Palace Master's position. If all 3 sides obtain victory in one group and defeat in the other, then the strength of the candidate for the Palace Master will be determined. The utmost East Sage Emperor said indifferently. After saying those words, the utmost East Sage Emperor took a glance at Qin Yu with a hidden intention. Evidently, this rule was very advantageous to Qin Yu. With Qin Yu's formation space, he would definitely be able to defeat Dong Ho and Shui Yu. Only at this moment did Qin Yu discover Dong Ho's group on the other side of the martial practice grounds. Dong Ho's group only consisted of 3 people, 2 men and a woman. The eyes of the leader, Dong Ho, were flickering with light. After the utmost East Sage Emperor finished speaking, one of the 3 great palace masters, Huangfu Lai Jun, began to preside over the competition. The first match was between Shui Yu's group and Qin Yu's group. Huang Fu Liejuan's voice resounded through the entire martial practice grounds. The first match, Shui Yu's group of low-level heavenly deities against Qin Yu's group of low-level heavenly deities. Begin. Right after Huang Fu Liejuan's voice left his mouth, the over 10,000 heavenly deities around the martial practice grounds immediately started to shout loudly. The majority of the heavenly deities were shouting and yelling excitedly. While shouting and yelling, Shui Yu's group of low-level heavenly deities, a green-clothed woman, walked into the center of the martial practice grounds. That green-clothed woman, isn't she the woman who was whipped by Huang Fu Ling? Qin Yu clearly remembered that green-clothed woman. Among the low-level heavenly deities, this green-clothed woman's strength could not be considered to be very strong. That Shui Yu wanted this green-clothed woman to fight? Master, this subordinate is going to fight, said Sui Fu respectfully. Go ahead. Qin Yu was filled with confidence toward Sui Fu. He had seen the battle between Sui Fu and Kong Qi. As Sui Fu possessed a high-quality heavenly divine artifact, it should be extremely easy for him to take care of a low-level heavenly deity. Sui Fu firmly nodded. He then began to walk toward the center of the martial practice grounds with large strides. With a height of 3 meters, intertwined muscles and arms as thick as thighs, Sui Fu gave off a very domineering aura. As for the green-clothed woman, she appeared to be extremely delicate and soft. Big guy, be careful, said that green-clothed woman with a sweet smile. Sui Fu had a cold expression on his face. With a flip of his hand, he took out a battle axe. After that, the battle axe grew in size. In an instant, it grew to nearly 3 meters tall, the same height as Sui Fu. He held the enormous battle axe in his hand. Little girl, you should admit defeat, said Sui Fu. Without bothering to say anything else, he immediately unleashed his powerful attack. Sui Fu's thick right arm brandished the enormous battle axe. Then, he soared into the sky. After that, he and the battle axe both grew to the size of a small mountain and smashed down from the sky. Qin Yu had a confident smile on his face. As for that green-clothed woman, her expression changed. She immediately flipped her hand and 3 green streams of air appeared in her hand. Those 3 streams of air began to grow. In the end, each and every one of them grew to several thousand meters long. These 3 rope-like green streams of air directly bound the small mountain-sized battle axe. Immediately, Sui Fu returned to his original appearance. Even the enormous battle axe returned to its original appearance. You! Sui Fu angrily glared at that green-clothed woman. He frantically struggled. However, no matter what, he was unable to break free from that binding. Qin Yu was startled. Sui Fu actually lost? Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure. A low-level heavenly deity actually used a Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure. Isn't the 100 Flowers God King pampering that Shui Yu too much? Qin Yu's expression became a bit ugly. It seemed that the battle for the Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure was not as easy as he had imagined. Chapter 556. The entire martial arts practice field was silent for a while. Just now, when they saw Sui Fu's momentum and moves, except for those from 100 Flowers Mansion who knew the details, everyone else thought that Sui Fu would definitely win. But now, however, the Sui Fu that was tied up and constantly struggling explained everything. Qin Yu's side versus Shui Yu's side. Shui Yu's side wins the first match. Huang Fu Liejun was also stunned for only a moment before he managed to react. Now, let's begin the second match. The mid-level heavenly deity from Shui Yu's faction against the mid-level heavenly deity from Qin Yu's faction. As soon as he finished speaking, the tens of thousands of spectating heavenly gods in the training grounds immediately broke into a heated discussion. The first battle just now had indeed surprised them. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu smiled as he looked to the 100 Flowers God King beside him. He said, Liu Xiong, you've truly worked hard. You actually allowed a low-level heavenly deity to use your Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure, Heaven Binding Rope. The 100 Flowers God King, Huang Fu Liu Xiong, merely raised the corners of her mouth slightly. She said indifferently, "Second brother, it is not strange for me to lend a second-rate grand mist spiritual treasure to someone else. Merely, this Chinyu is actually able to take out a high-quality, heavenly divine artifact. This has truly surprised me." High-quality, heavenly divine artifact. The number of artifact craftsmen that could craft high-quality, heavenly divine artifacts was extremely small. In the divine realm, there were not many artifact craftsmen that could craft high-quality, heavenly divine artifacts. Even for the high-level heavenly deities, only a portion of them possessed high-quality, heavenly divine artifacts. Many of the high-level heavenly deities were still using mid-quality, heavenly divine artifacts. The utmost East Sage Emperor lightly smiled and said, "For him to be able to set up a formation space and possess such a high level of cultivation in formation arrays, I reckon there should be a formation array expert teaching him from behind. For him to possess a high-quality, heavenly divine artifact is not strange at all. Let's not talk about this anymore. The second round of the competition is about to begin." The utmost East Sage Emperor and the Centauria God King both looked towards the martial stage. As for the Gold Sword God King, he had remained silent since the very beginning. He had only been watching everything that was happening on the martial stage. Times, Master, don't worry. Even if my opponent possesses a Grand Mist spiritual treasure, this subordinate will still win. At most, I'll only be able to destroy a few clones. Black Dragon Tan Jio's eyes faintly flickered with a red light. Qin Yu lightly nodded. "You've won. That high-quality heavenly divine artifact shall be yours." Qin Yu possessed 4 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. He had originally planned to bestow them to his subordinates. That Chozhong Fu already possessed one himself. Thus, he decided to bestow one to Tan Jiu. This was something that Qin Yu had planned in his heart. "Yes, Master." Black Dragon Tan Jiu lightly nodded his head. He then directly walked toward the center of the martial practice field. A white-clothed woman was already standing in the center of the martial practice field. The woman in white had a cold expression. The 9-headed black dragon, Tan Jiu, possessed a head of short scarlet hair. Under his scarlet sharp eyebrows, his pair of gloomy eyes emitted a cold and sharp aura. In terms of gloominess and coldness, that white-clothed woman was inferior to Tan Jiu. "You will undoubtedly lose this battle." Tan Jiu pointed at the white-clothed woman with one hand and directly said. The woman in white only sneered disdainfully. She flipped her hand and took out a dark green long sword. When this dark green long sword appeared, everyone's attention was focused on it. On Shui Yu's side, a low-level heavenly deity was able to take out a Grand Mist spiritual treasure. In that case, what about this mid-level heavenly deity? Not to mention the others, even the utmost East Sage Emperor had noticed this dark green long sword. Qin Yu was the same. Merely, that dark green long sword was too far away from Qin Yu. Qin Yu was unable to inspect it. High-quality heavenly divine artifact. Haha, Liu Xiang, why didn't you continue to borrow Grand Mist spiritual treasures? The utmost East Sage Emperor said to the 100 Flowers God King. The Gold Sword God King, who had been silent the entire time, spoke. Liu Xiang being able to borrow a Grand Mist spiritual treasure had already caused the martial competition to be biased. If she were to borrow another one, it would be excessive. Liu Xiang herself only possesses a total of 2 second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures, right? That's right. Big brother, I have indeed lent this Grand Mist spiritual treasure to Shui Yu. As for who Shui Yu will lend it to, that is Shui Yu's own decision. The 100 Flowers God King was not joking around when facing the Gold Sword God King. The Gold Sword God King lightly nodded. The utmost East Sage Emperor took a glance at the distant Shui Yu. That girl Shui Yu is quite scheming. That mid-level heavenly deity subordinate of Qin Yu's truly has a peculiar weapon. The other 2 God Kings immediately turned their attention over. At this moment, Tan Jiu had already taken out the heavy sword that Qin Yu had given him. In Tan Jiu's hand, this enormous heavy sword suddenly split into 3. As for Tan Jiu himself, he had instantly turned into 9 people. Of these 9 great clones, 3 of them were respectively holding the 3 high-quality, heavenly divine artifacts that the enormous heavy sword had turned into. As for the other 6 clones, they were holding 6 black rods. From different directions, the 9 of them suddenly reached their peak speed. Like 9 arrows, they shot toward the white-clothed woman. The white-clothed woman's expression slightly changed. She never expected that her opponent actually possessed 9 clones. This was truly too frightening. Bang! The 6 black rods simultaneously smashed toward the white-clothed woman. The white-clothed woman flipped the dark green long sword in her hand and created 6 sword silhouettes that blocked the 6 black rods. Tangio's 7th clone held a battle blade-shaped high-quality heavenly divine artifact in his hand as he ruthlessly hacked down. The white-clothed woman grew anxious. She had also attempted to use her spatial domain. Merely, her opponent's 9 great clones had used their spatial domain at the same time. Thus, their control over space was instead a bit stronger than hers. Faced with this hack, the white-clothed woman was unable to dodge in time. Bang! The ground beneath the white-clothed woman's feet slightly trembled. The entire martial arts practice ground also slightly trembled. However, the ground of the martial arts practice ground was not damaged in the slightest. The enormous heavy sword was separated into 2 battle blades and a battle sword. Tangio's 8th clone followed by the 7th clone. Once again, they held a battle blade-shaped high-quality heavenly divine artifact as they ruthlessly hacked down. The white-clothed woman was unable to recover her heavenly divine energy in time. Thus, she could only forcibly block the attacks once again. Puchi! The sharp battle sword directly pierced through the white-clothed woman's body. If you continue to resist, I will definitely kill you. Tangio directly sent a divine awareness voice transmission. That white-clothed woman looked to Tangio, who was holding a battle sword. She then looked to the 8 Tangios who were holding battle blades and black rods. She then looked to the battle sword that had pierced through her chest. Her expression changed several times. The disparity between them was truly enormous. A high-quality heavenly divine artifact that could be split apart was a perfect match for Tangio, who could transform into 9 clones. We admit defeat for this match. Suddenly, a voice sounded from the side of the martial arts practice ground. The person who spoke was precisely Xueyu. That white-clothed woman retrieved the dark green sword in her hand. She took a glance at Tangio and then silently walked back. When she walked to Xueyu's side, this white-clothed woman leaned onto Xueyu's shoulder and started crying. Xueyi, don't be sad. Our opponent's strength has indeed surpassed our expectations. That high-quality heavenly divine artifact of his is also extremely miraculous. This cannot be blamed on you. Xueyu consoled. At this moment, Huangfu Liejuan's voice sounded. This match has been won by Qin Yu's side. In the 2 matches now, both sides have obtained a victory each. Right now, we are about to proceed with the most important 3rd match. The 2 sides in the match are the 2 candidates, Qin Yu and Xueyu. Very well, let the match begin. Everyone in the surroundings of the martial arts practice ground held their breaths. The 2 great candidates, Qin Yu and Xueyu, were both upper echelons of Mount Dazzling Gold. Everyone was carefully and quietly watching this great battle. Qin Yu and Xueyu quietly walked to the center of the martial arts practice ground from the 2 sides. Miss Xueyu. Qin Yu bowed and said. Xueyu lightly smiled. Mr. Qin Yu, it would appear that I will be losing to you today. Merely, even if I am going to lose, I still wish to experience the legendary formation space. Qin Yu lightly nodded. Right when Xueyu was about to attack, Qin Yu closed his eyes. He displayed a tranquil and gentle smile on his face. He had entered a profound state of creation. His hands casually streaked across the air. Several rays of light flew out from Qin Yu's hands. Everyone in the martial arts practice ground opened their eyes wide as they watched this scene. This included the utmost East Sage Emperor and the other 2 God Kings. They had heard of formation spaces before. However, they had never seen Qin Yu personally set up one. Those rays of light were incomparably bright and dazzling. Like Lu Xing's descent, they landed at the edge of the martial arts practice ground. Formation, universe, complete. Qin Yu smiled as he opened his eyes. The smile on his face was a smile of confidence. It was the confidence that Qin Yu had in his own formation space. Qin Yu's formation speed was too fast. Before Shui Yu could even attack, she had already fallen deep into the formation space. The eyes of the utmost East Sage Emperor, 100 Flowers God King, and Gold Sword God King flashed at the same time. The three God Kings stared at Qin Yu. Their gazes seemed to have materialized. "Did you see it clearly?" the utmost East Sage Emperor asked. The 100 Flowers God King and Gold Sword God King both nodded. The 100 Flowers God King's eyes were filled with astonishment. "I never thought that someone would be able to reach such a level in terms of formations. Especially when setting up the formation, there seem to be some changes in the space of the formation. It's very peculiar. It's different from the space that we form using the spatial laws," Gold Sword God King said. "Perhaps this is the mystical aspect of formations." The utmost East Sage Emperor laughed. "Although this Qin Yu's formation space is slightly different from ours, its might is not weak at all." Regardless of whether it was the utmost East Sage Emperor or the other two God Kings, they simply did not know that the reason why Qin Yu's formation space was different from the space that they, God Kings, had set up was because Qin Yu had used the spatial laws of the universe world to set up the formation. The two sides used different spatial laws. Naturally, there would be differences. However, the three God Kings still believed that this was the case with the formation space. After all, since ancient times, no one had been able to set up a formation space. Even the craftsman god, Cheho Yuan, had only come close. The Gold Sword God King, who rarely spoke in the past, had spoken quite a bit today. At the very least, he had spoken a few sentences. With this formation space, this Qin Yu is the #1 person beneath the God Kings. After saying those words, the Gold Sword God King shut his mouth and spoke no more. The utmost East Sage Emperor looked at the 100 Flowers God King. The 100 Flowers God King smiled. "I have no objections to this Qin Yu becoming the palace master of the Misty Mystic Palace. I am truly curious. With his cultivation in formations, if he were to study artifact forging, would his accomplishments be able to match up to the craftsman god?" At this moment, Shui Yu was trapped in the formation space. This place. Shui Yu looked at her surroundings in shock. Shui Yu still remembered that when the 100 Flowers God King was guiding her, she had once set up a space to trap her. That feeling was exactly the same as now. It was a boundless world. Qin Yu. Shui Yu looked before her. At this moment, Qin Yu had already appeared before her. Qin Yu smiled and said, "Shui Yu, it is impossible for you to break my formation space." As Qin Yu smiled, the surrounding space collapsed and then recovered. As he laughed, the heavens fell and the earth cracked. Of course, this was within the range of the formation space. However, she, Shui Yu, was trapped in the formation space and would be trampled upon by Qin Yu. Unless she became a God King and used the spatial laws to break this formation. "I've lost." Seeing the scene before her, Shui Yu sighed in her heart. She knew that she would undoubtedly lose. Shui Yu looked to Qin Yu. She suddenly smiled and said, "Mr. Qin Yu, I had originally thought that I would be able to win. I had lent my one and only Grand Mist spiritual treasure to a low-level heavenly deity so that I could win this battle. I had also lent a high-quality heavenly divine artifact to a mid-level heavenly deity. However, even now, I've still lost. Firstly, I've lost to your formation. Secondly, I've lost to... You actually have 2 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts?" Shui Yu possessed sufficient connections in the 100 Flowers Mansion to be able to borrow a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. However, Qin Yu knew too few people in Mount Dazzling Gold. For him to have his subordinates use 2 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts, this was truly shocking. High-quality heavenly divine artifacts. They were left to me by my senior. Qin Yu said directly. Shui Yu nodded in understanding. So that's the case. May I ask, is that senior the person who taught Mr. Qin Yu the formation techniques? You could say that. Qin Yu nodded and said. Shui Yu lightly nodded. Mr. Qin Yu, I admit defeat. Please let me out. Immediately, heaven and earth began to spin. The entire world had changed. The originally boundless world had disappeared. What appeared before them was a bustling martial practice ground. All of the heavenly deities in the martial practice ground were looking at Qin Yu and Shui Yu. They saw that Shui Yu and Qin Yu had suddenly appeared. They were unable to determine if it was Shui Yu who had broken through the formation or if it was Qin Yu who had let Shui Yu out. I admit defeat. Shui Yu's voice resonated through the entire martial practice ground. The martial practice ground immediately became lively. A large number of heavenly deities began to discuss. Shui Yu had actually lost. This Mr. Qin Yu had actually won. The first group of matches has ended. Qin Yu's side has obtained victory. Now, the second group of matches will begin. Qin Yu's side versus Dong Ho's side. Huang Fu Lai Jun said with a clear voice. Qin Yu turned his gaze toward Dong Ho. His next target would be Dong Ho. Dong Ho suddenly spoke. There's no need to compete in the second group of matches. Our side admits defeat. Mr. Qin Yu's formation space has already convinced me. I fear that no one below the God King level would be able to break through this formation space. Everyone in the martial practice ground grew quiet. All of the heavenly deities were looking at Dong Ho. No matter what, they should at least compete. However, the reality was that Dong Ho had straightforwardly admitted defeat. This Dong Ho is quite self-aware. The utmost East Sage Emperor lightly nodded. Dong Ho's subordinates did not possess any grand mist spiritual treasures. He had barely managed to borrow a high-quality heavenly divine artifact for one of his subordinates. As for the low-level heavenly deities, they only used mid-quality heavenly divine artifacts. With such strength, it was likely that they would not be able to win a single match against Qin Yu's side. As such, it was better for them to admit defeat. Thus, they decided to act magnanimous. I've won? Qin Yu was startled upon hearing Dong Ho's admission of defeat. Originally, he had planned to compete. However, it would appear that the position of the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace had already landed on his head. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.